I won't say much as we start because, of course, we have a long journey today and tomorrow, but I want just to welcome you quickly. And we are going to start off. First of all, it's a pleasure for me to see everyone and to have you on board. We meet yet again on another momentous occasion and very interesting discussion moving forward. But I would like to give this first chance to Lotte to give us welcome remarks and a bit of introductions on this training that we are having in the next 2 days. Lotte, if you are there,
I am.
Go ahead.
I am. Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you to all of you who have signed up. We have, very fortunately, we have a lot of the old members who we know very well, and then we're also welcoming a lot of our new members who, unfortunately, we haven't met in person yet, but it's so good to have you, and we are thrilled that you find it interesting to join some of the trainings. And I think it's also a good testament of sort of relevance that we have some of the older ones, the older members who've been with us for a long time, who still feels that what we are offering, trainings we're offering, are relevant to them. But let me just jump right into it. Big welcome to all of you. We're very fortunate that we are partnering with the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety is partnering with EASST, who's also one of our long-term members, a very accomplished NGO who has been working on policy change for a long time. And they have offered to help us with this training today and the training tomorrow. And with us, we have Emily Carr. Emily, would you say hi, just briefly?
Yeah, hi, lovely to be here. Really excited to be taking part today. I'm really pleased to be asked to partner with you. I'm Deputy Director at EASST. I'm going to be talking a little bit later on some tips on planning advocacy campaigns. And we've got 3 EASST partners joining us tomorrow who are going to give some case studies. So really pleased to be here and looking forward to joining the training.
Great. And we also have Claire Hoyland. Claire is also part of EASST, but she's also with Fire Aid.
Yes, hi everyone. Again, delighted to be here, and thank you to invite us to the training. It's going to be very interesting and looking forward to it.
Yeah. And also not with EASST, but sort of affiliated with EASST, we have David Ward, who's joining us later. David is someone I'm sure those who have been a member for a long time know very well from several global meetings. And I remember one of the first times I met David, he said, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I think that sort of captures very well what we're trying to get out of this, make a lot of noise, make a lot of sort of noise around what you want to do, because what we have seen here over the UN Road Safety Week is that you have been extremely good at making a lot of noise. You have been really good at getting in contact with your decision makers. You have done a lot of community events, achieved a lot of endorsements. You have got a lot of commitments to 30 kilometers an hour. And what we really want to see is that long-term sustainable change, policy change. And this is what this training is about. How do you bridge the campaigning that you have done, for example, for UN Road Safety Week, and make it into long-term advocacy and policy change? So I don't want to talk a lot about all these things because Patrick is, from our side, the one who's leading this. We also have, so Patrick Kinanjui, would you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Yes, this is Patrick. For those who are new members or those who we may not have met, yes, I'm in charge of the capacity building, and I'm very happy to really be able to support the Alliance in that capacity. So welcome, and we'll be having a journey together today and tomorrow and even after. So thank you very much. And for those who we know each other quite well, always a pleasure to have you and to share and to exchange ideas. So welcome. Thank you.
So Patrick is in charge of this training. He's the one who's been behind the steering wheel on putting it together, listening to all of you, what you have asked us to, where your problems are, where you struggle. And he has listened to that and put this training together. We also have Valeria Motta, who's also with the Alliance team. And Vale is going to talk about policy change and political level. Vale, are you here?
Yes, I'm
say
here.
Hi.
Yeah, hi everyone. I was checking who are being part of this training, and I guess I know you, most of you, so it's very exciting. I will be touching base more on the legal aspects and technicality, and give you some ideas on how you can navigate your legal system and understand how we can do advocacy in a more effective way.
That's great. Okay, Vale and Patrick. Patrick, over to you. Thank you very much, and I wish you a good training.
Thank you very much, Lotte, for the inspiring remarks, and Vale, and also welcome officially Emily and Claire. Very glad to have you, and thank you for the helping me put this together and helping us actually in the delivery of this training. So actually, just to go back one step, of course, the training we tried to communicate earlier is shaping policy, and this was necessitated by, of course, the kind of needs and the gaps that we normally identify as we help, as we do our activities as NGOs under the umbrella of Global Alliance. We're able to look at some of these areas. And some of you may have been contacted directly to look at this particular idea of looking at policy. And of course, the rationale behind this is that over the years, and for those who have been there since 2016, all these capacity building efforts, we have really managed to make big strides in terms of, for example, knowing that we must base our activities, our actions on data and evidence. And that has been going on very well. Actually, from our evaluations, most, if not all, the NGOs are now able to research and look at data and evidence. And from that, you are able to move to an activity. So the activities that you do are no longer based on just emotions, passion, but rather there is some database that one can refer to, and that has been quite well. Then we have moved to a lot of our work on activities of awareness creation, which is actually a very key aspect, a key component of our entire work. And this has been through a lot of campaigns and making noise, as Lotte has said. And therefore, this again has become like a very good base for what the journey that we are making. So we are able to organize campaigns, do those events, and really, like we'll see quickly in the next subsection, like the 6th UN Road Safety Week was quite successful than even previously, especially in terms of reach. We were able to mobilize a lot of people, get more commitments and endorsements and so on. So this has been quite good progress. So moving forward, what we've been looking at is making those particular activities meaningful, and also making sure that they are long-lasting or they have a far-reaching impact. And this is only done, or can only be done, when we look at the laws, the policies, the legislation, whatever you may call them, but embedded in the political system and the goodwill of governments around. So we may make all that noise, but if it's not embedded in this, then it becomes, it may not be long-lasting, and this is what we need. So, and that's why this training shaping policy is quite important. And we thought that based on a lot of experiences that the Alliance members have in terms of there are those NGOs who have really been there, they have for a long time, they have been able to do this. Others are still struggling, others may not be aware of what are the tools and what are the tactics that you may want to use to move from point A to B, B to C, and all the way to maybe making the change you need in terms of political and legislative processes. So this is why this training was put together. And I know we have varied experiences. Some are quite high, others are medium, others are low. So what we need to do is we'll start with the fundamentals, look at the basic concepts, and then move to key specific areas, as well as a bit of technical and tools, as well as examples that will be drawn from, again, from the fraternity of the entire Global Alliance membership. And therefore, I'll go to the objectives of the training so that we are able to see what we need to achieve moving forward. So the first thing will be to just direct to compare and contrast. And this is just talking about campaigning. When you do campaigning, what is it? And lobbying and advocacy. So you can see the journey from campaigning, then lobbying to advocacy, and advocacy is what we are looking for, where we are looking at sort of redefining it, because all, we say as NGOs, our work is advocacy. But that will be the ultimate goal. So we'll be doing campaigning and lobbying and other activities, but in that terms of changes in policies that are long-lasting, and as well as we can call them more permanent, then that is where I think we want to see where they say the rubber is meeting the road in advocacy as it is defined clearly. So the second part will describe the legal framework for policy change, which is a very important aspect based on the fact that, you know, you come from different countries, different administrative structures, but generally what do you need to understand in your country legal framework to be able to even talk about changing policy or influencing policy for that matter. On the third point, we look at and we'll explore policy research and information sources. Again, a particular area that we may need to enhance moving forward, that to change something, you must have understanding. So in as much as we talk about the data as we are doing our activities, for policy, there may be required more technical, more expertise, more professional way of looking at things. So the research there will be highlighted and given some examples again, and we are lucky we have EASST to help us with that, how they have done it, do particular case examples and case studies. Then we want to see how we can start applying those concepts, the fundamentals, the tools, and the knowledge and the skills we gain from that to develop a course of action towards policy change. So we may have different policies we want to change in our countries, and some of our NGOs have been working on specific policies, maybe from helmets to seat belts to car restraints and so on. But how do you develop a course of action towards that policy change? Again, based on the knowledge and the skills we will have gained from the first three aspects. And then we want to also tailor this training towards something that we started a bit earlier, you know, from before the UN Road Safety Week. We had a lot of activations and looking at Love 30 was a particular and a very specific activity, message that was very specific, therefore, and we came up with the Road Safety Week ended, and then we came to what next, the next activities. So we still want to move with that momentum, remembering that it's more of activism and moving towards now advocacy to change that. So we are going to tailor this and look at how collectively and individually we can push the Street for Life Love 30 advocacy movement towards specific global advocacy plan for the head of state meeting in 2022. So this will be our 2 days. So the first 2 days we'll cover 1, 2, and 3. Then tomorrow we cover 4 and 5. Okay. So is there, I think I've at least given us an overview of what we'll be doing. And what I'd like us to do first now is an exercise. Sorry, I think the agenda is, okay, I'm missing the agenda, yes. So the agenda quickly, so we'll get started, have an overview of lobbying, campaigning and advocacy, policy and legal process with Valeria, and policy research with EASST, developing a course of action for policy change with EASST, application of Love 30 group presentations and looking ahead. That will work all of us, including everyone in this room. So we work in 6, 7, and 8. We'll all work together and see what is the best way forward. Just a breather, because we just want to have a breather in terms of how do we start. So what we thought initially is that to make sense of the whole training and to start sort of warming the floor, warming the room, if you remember, there was, as I said, a lot of push to have the UN Road Safety Week message continue, and we sort of strengthening it instead of maybe what we have seen in the past years, that after the event, the week, we tend to lay down and wait for the next 2 years. So there was this need, and we all agreed, I remember, that we need to push this 30-kilometer around and see how that kilometer Love 30 can be embedded within all other activities. Whether you are doing post-crash, there's a way you can embed 30 kilometers, whether you're doing the seatbelt, there's a way you can embed that. But what I want us to do now, I'll stop sharing this screen, but I want to look at the balance sheet of gains and losses. Most of the times I just highlight why losses. Losses are like failures, and you know, as we had said, we have always said failures can be turned into success. So it's not always wrong to look at what did not work or what is not working. The gains make us celebrate, and therefore it's quite good. But the gains, on the other hand, must be used to create a more practical initiative that can work to make sure that those gains, they are giving impact, or they make the change that we want. So I want you to reflect now, everyone, just reflect. Since the UN Global Road Safety Week that was there in May, we were challenged, and we challenged ourselves that we will not keep the tools down. We are going to keep moving and creating that momentum without forgetting and making sure that wherever we are as NGOs in our countries, we are able to keep that alive. This can be a challenge. It could be have worked to some, and this is what we want to see. Put a balance sheet on what has worked well so far since May to now. What is happening? What, according to you, your NGO, what have you been doing? What has worked based on all the gains that were done, that were obtained during the Road Safety Week? Remember, we have endorsement, there were commitments, community was mobilized in the highest level we have ever seen. We had a lot of, there were open letters, all those activities. I would like us to reflect, and we just pick a few people, and you can raise your hand when I open the screen, because I want to type some of these gains and losses. Then we look quickly what gains and losses that are key that we can learn from. So, and therefore, I want to prepare Dilip Panda, you will be the first, but just think about it as I open the other screen. Then I'm looking at, I want to ask Tanzania. There's Alferio, I'll ask you what has worked well and what has not worked well in Tanzania. Then I'll go to, do you have Eduardo? Yeah, Eduardo, you'll be next. And therefore, let me stop sharing this screen and open another one. Okay.
Should I go on, Patrick?
Just 1 second. Let me just, I want to type what you say and say, yeah, okay, there we are. Okay, yes. So what we are looking at here, if you can see my screen, I think, Vale, my screen is visible, right?
Yes, Patrick, we can see your screen.
Yes, it is.
Okay, yeah, so we are just looking at just using the old method of like the finance balance sheet. What is working well so far since, and what is not working well. So if we can get a few things here that they can keep us moving and see where maybe we need to improve, where things are working. So yes, Dilip, which one do you want to start with, the gains or the credit or the debit? Dilip, if you can hear me, go ahead. So, Dilip, we can't hear you. Just you prepare. Alferio from Tanzania.
Are you getting me?
Okay, you are good now. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Dilip.
Yeah. Are you asking me on regarding only on the Global Road Safety Week?
Yes. What has been happening to?
Yeah, actually, thank you. But we are not done it as per the requirement and in a fruitful way. But after we have done at our own capacity for a month in July, entire July, and we have one achievement is that we have requested the district collector and the regional transport authority to at least to do lower speed 20 to 30 kilometer speed in urban areas. So finally, we have got a letter from the district collector, but unfortunately we not able to make it more effect in at state level. That is only because of we need to work it is as a united way, and not a single organization can do it fruitful. If we will do it organized way, unitedly, then definitely we can get it. But we
Okay.
try
Okay.
we try
Yes,
to
that's
connect with the state heads and minister of the transport, but we failed
okay.
because of some reason here lockdown is there for COVID-19. That was one of the we are not able to meet these type of people.
So good. Okay, that's fine. So you'll be very short. Like this is quite good. You have reached out to the authorities and you have gotten like a letter of engagement, and maybe there are some. So that's okay. So feel free to.
But the social media campaign has given us a good return that most of the people also came to know that we are trying to do a lower speed in school areas, urban areas, or
Okay.
market areas. That
Very
impact
good.
has.
That's okay, Dilip, because we want to hear a bit of more variety of ideas. So that's good. You have more social media attention and authorities. So thank you very much. We'll continue the discussion as we move on. Let's hear from Alferio, then Eduardo. Yep. Tanzania,
you.
Alferio.
Thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. On 3rd June 2021, the special bill supplement, the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2021 was released to the Special Gazette of the United Republic of Tanzania, number 7, volume 101, as I said, dated 3rd June 2021, and printed by the government printer, Dodoma, by order of the government. So it means our long time cry, amendment of Road Traffic Act, which excluded the 5 risk factors, now it has been included.
Okay.
And it just remained to go for the first discussion in the National Parliament. It includes now the reduction of speed to 30 kilometers per hour in towns, in urban, in schools, and whatever, including those 5 risk factors.
Absolutely. Okay, great. I think that's a good. And does anything that has gone not so well, anything that has not gone so well?
So far, everything, we get a good support from the government. So far, everything is okay.
Okay, very good. Okay, Eduardo, you're next.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I think that from the strong points, from the gains, I believe that the most important that we've got was also related to the outreach with the authorities. We have managed to, in the context of the Global Week, to reapproach them and reinforce the necessity of implementing the project that we were presenting them that was related to road safety on school areas. So, and we did get this commitment from them. They reinforced that it was one of their priorities. So I think that this was the most important one they did. And also there was one specific thing that we had a change in the municipal administration from last year to this one. And our project was settled with the previous administration. So we used the context of the week to re-engage the new administration and the new authorities that came. So we could reinforce this commitment with the new authorities. I think this was the most important thing that we took from the work of the week. And
okay,
as per the debate, I can't really tell. But if I had to say something, I would say that regarding the social media actions, we did a lot of material. We do produce videos, we produce photos, we did a lot of stuff. And we can tell we had a lot of impact. But this is the hardest to measure, I think, because we do impact. We know that people saw our material and all, but it's hard to really check on how meaningful and how great the impact was related to actual consequence. You know? Yeah, but right. As a whole, we could see that the week was important to have the subject on the table, and we did get a lot of attention to the area during that time. That was mainly our
thank you. Yeah, again, thank you very much also for pointing out that because that would be actually one of the, as we proceed with the discussion, we'll be looking at, so if you make huge numbers, you have reached so many numbers, what next? Because yes, numbers are important, but then what will you do with those numbers that you have reached? So I think that will be okay. So thank you very much for that. Any hand up? Somebody would like to share? I mean, I need 2 more people, and now it's off. If you raise up your hand, I'm going to see. And Martin, feel free to direct me where the hand is up if you are there. Any hand up on sharing about what you have seen working well and what you have seen not working well so far?
Good evening, all. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Just say your name for the sake of people who...
Good evening, all. This is Vijay from Tracks Road Safety NGO India. Presently, we are working on helmet safety. This is a campaign, helmet coalition, right? So we are working on this campaign since 2014. And it has 2 approaches. That is advocacy with the concerned stakeholders at central government and state government, and side by side sensitizing motorized two-wheeler riders and general masses on the adverse effect of fake or substandard helmets in India. So we have achieved some we have some achievements in this regard also. On 26th November 2020, the central government, that means Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, Government of India, has introduced legislation wherein they have put a complete ban on fakes and substandard helmets in India, which also translate that the non-standardized helmet are not allowed in India. Nobody can manufacture such helmets. Nobody can stock these kind of helmets, and nobody can sell this kind of helmet by the virtue of this particular legislation. So this is the greatest, that is the greatest achievement, and our efforts.
Would you say, I've checked here, like the UN Road Safety Week was able to give that sort of the momentum, the spirit, and that's why you are saying relating in that. Is that correct, or is that not correct? That the Road Safety Week.
Your voice is your voice has so much echo. I'm not getting you properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that from India Trucks. And final, anybody else maybe who want to say something on the Road Safety Week so far, the gains and what is working and what is not working? Okay. I'll check with, I want to go to South Africa to Frost. David, if you can share just quickly any gains or things that are not working. Frost? Okay.
Hello, Patrick, you there?
Yes, hello? Yes, there you are. Okay, go ahead, yes.
Yeah. I find myself at a bit of a loss to answer your question, in the sense that I'm a board member of the safety partnership, so I'm not really on the ground to measure what is taking place, and I'd almost want to defer to Lucky
host.
the operational manager of the. This is purely from, shall I say, from an oversight. A perspective of looking and seeing and learning, so that one can feed this into the structure to see what is working and what is not working. But I think one of the issues, maybe in South Africa, we've just had our hands full with a lot of stuff, and to measure these things has been very difficult of late. So forgive me for not being able to give a concrete answer on that. I'm noting with special attention what the others are saying in terms of that.
Okay, yeah, I think that, yeah, quite understandable. And maybe I was looking more of the, you know, like the SADC people, maybe host, you want to jump in, host, and just say from the Road Safety Week, anything that has really been gained or you're doing that is positive and gaining from the momentum or any losses, maybe host, you can conclude this part for us. What has been happening maybe in Namibia?
Hi, everybody. Yes, from the side of the SADC Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety, we certainly in the United Nations Global Road Safety Week have established the organization. We are in the process of finalizing our constitution for the organization. The idea is that we are linked to whichever Africa group is coming up at the end of the day, and that's going to feed into the global alliance. In Namibia itself, we've had, definitely we have got now cooperation agreements from our local authority in Windhoek, whereas before we had the commitment that they will change the signs, and this time they are saying we're going to do it. So I'm hoping that that will change. Unfortunately, COVID hasn't been very nice to us over the last couple of months, and sort of everything came to a standstill in Namibia. Secondly, we've also involved the Deputy Prime Minister as a patron of road safety in Namibia to, from that angle, to get commitment from the government to have a policy on lower speeds around schools and shopping centers.
Okay.
I think our losses certainly is the media involvement. We haven't achieved what we wanted to achieve with media involvement, and then the second one is obviously the COVID pandemic, which has given us major headaches in Namibia.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for all those who have contributed to this. And the idea here is just to look at the fact that the same spirit, we are saying, what should we be doing? Yes. Is there someone else?
Yeah, me.
Okay.
Hi, Patrick. How are you?
Very well, Afef.
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, thank you. So yeah, I want to add something, Patrick, because it's very interesting what you are saying now, because here in Tunisia, we made a very interesting achievement, and we had the commitment from our government in the UN week, Road Safety Week. And yeah, we, as I don't know, so because you are following, we started our advocacy for the reduction of speed of 30 kilometers around school since 2019, but hopefully this year, and as I said, so it was a very interesting opportunity for us to make a pressure on the UN Road Safety Week on our government, and we had the commitment and the validation from the Ministry of Transport for the revision of the law. And yes, the procedure started in the UN week, and now we are just waiting some few days, and we will have so the reduction of speed around school will be mandatory around all the school at the national level in Tunisia.
So, great. And based on the fact that I know it's been a long journey, and that's
yes.
So that's moving. So this the UN Road Safety Week has continued to put the pressure, and also to make sure a lot of what can I say, the buzz, the noise has been until it has come to it's edging towards the law, and it will be sort of implemented or passed, which is quite where we are all looking to head towards. So thank you very much, Afef. I think that concludes that session, and I appreciate again all those who have contributed. So let's, just again, feel free to share. This is the conversation moves on. But so to conclude this part, I'll say again, just at the risk of repeating myself, is the small steps that you make to make sure that that's not the end. The event is not the end, but rather those gains that we talk about, those community you're able to mobilize, the numbers you're able to reach, the commitments you had, the endorsements. Did you have a plan to follow up? And how is that thing moving? Is it working? It is not working. Where it's working, then are you grasping those opportunities, those moments, to make sure that you capitalize on them? Or where it's not working, are you really trying to change the approach. So as you continue to monitor yourself, are you changing the approach to see that we are not waiting for the next 2 years to start again, say we are awakening again that spirit, but rather it's been moving on. So that was the essence, and it's good to always keep your balance sheet on those activities. So is there I want to ask for questions at this moment, because I want us just to do something else as we introduce, looking at the contrast between campaigning, lobbying, and advocacy, and this is what we've been doing. So again, it'll be a quick exercise before I usher in Vale for the next session. So just bear with me, I just change the screen again. All right. Okay. So as we started, we had talked about, we've been doing activities, campaigning. Everybody knows about campaigning. First of all, I think every country that is political knows about campaigning. So it's not a very new concept. In road safety, we know we have been doing these events, organizing them, activations, and making that noise on specific maybe days, specific events, specific weeks, and so on. And also our continued maybe campaigns in our individual level as NGOs in our countries, whatever area that we are working on, campaign is at the center of what we do. But then we do also, some NGOs have gone ahead to do a lot of lobbying, and others are still trying to get their grasp on how to lobby, and others have done advocacy, while others are trying to move from advocacy, from lobbying to do real advocacy. So in this session, therefore, as we said, we are going to see the connection, the differences, the the relationships of these three processes. And the first thing I would like for you to look at is these particular pictures. This was popular sometime, I think, last year. And if I'm just checking at this picture, in terms of what you see and what you know from the last year, is this lobbying, is this advocacy, is this campaign? And the question is directed to, looking at Abdul from Bangladesh. Is this a campaign picture? Is it a lobbying picture, or is it advocacy?
Yes, it is campaign.
Okay, okay. So this is a campaign picture, okay? And so do we have Muntasir? Okay. 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 Now, Hector, I want to go to you, and what you see in this picture, Hector, is this campaigning, lobbying, or is it advocacy? Hector, if you can unmute your microphone. Okay, maybe it's there. And do we have Sam from Uganda?
It's an advocacy.
Okay, according to advocacy. Okay, so look at what's happening in the picture. Okay, and this one, and I want to hear the voice of Prerana. Prerana, what do you see here in this picture? Is it advocacy, campaigning, just from your eyes, or is it campaigning, advocacy, or lobbying?
It's a lobby.
Okay, anyhow, those are just visuals, but so we want to first of all look at the differences here and quickly look at whether we are all a bit clear on when whatever you are doing, you are able to define what level are you at. And you find that sometimes whether these levels, they look like they are distinct, they are not distinct. So there's a difference, there's a connection, there's a relationship. So when you have those actions that are sort of they are aimed at changing that awareness, where you have the mobilization, which of course we agree that as NGOs we've been able to do that quite well. That we go to the communities where they're talking about the school communities, where they're talking about motor taxi drivers, where they're talking of this, we create awareness within the community because you have seen and observed certain issues, certain problems. So how do you make sure that the public is, of course, having that awareness that is actually a problem? So this is where the campaign comes about. So those actions, the events and the activities that raise awareness. So that is very key for each NGO, especially those maybe that are quite a bit new on this kind of trainings, that you look at and define that this is a campaign, and you're able to actually, again, based on how you define what you're doing, you're able to know what resources do you need, what do you need to do, and therefore by defining exactly where you are. But it doesn't end there. You move to another level whereby people are aware, and then you have this, what we call influencing some decision makers. And this is part that is very quickly connected with the part we are looking at advocacy, that if you are going to have, some decision makers, or you want to approach some decision makers, and a good example is what we were saying, on what we are working again through our Commit to Act campaign, that you need to have approach decision makers. Some you may know them from your past relationships, others you don't know them, but you need to approach them to make sure that they understand your case and you influence them to a certain direction. And then you come to very key actions that you aim at changing now the policies. And this is the ultimate sort of, you want to change the policies because policies will be embedded eventually in law and the practices, meaning that if you want to achieve change, the practice must change. So what was happening at point A, at the end of a policy change, it has improved, and you're able to measure that. So that's sort of the difference. As I'm saying, it can be a journey, and what you'll find that you may move back and forth or from one level to the next if you are aware of what you are really doing. Am I aiming at campaigning? Am I aiming at lobbying or advocacy? The relationship, therefore, when you want to build public support, you're looking at campaigning. Public support, you look at campaigning, and that doesn't mean that you are not involving, decision makers, but you need public support. Therefore, when we talk about signing petitions, making sure people are demonstrating on the streets, or they are picketing, or using placards to say something, then you build that support. Then when you lobby, you're persuading the government people, the leaders, specific ones that you may approach or those you may know. And their advocacy requires any plan that will attempt to influence the policy. So based on that, therefore, quickly is that the policy we are looking at advocacy for the level that we want to move towards is, we've been doing campaigning and we'll continue doing campaigning as a mainstay. Then we do lobbying, but we still have now to start thinking of really influencing policy for more sort of permanent changes in practice and bringing that change that we require. Then the connection. So public events, I'll say like those demonstrations, and those are we are real. Then face-to-face meetings, and this could be a good example, like what you say, can you plan for a roundtable where you're able to present your issues and you're able to actually negotiate at the table and see that this is what we require. And of course, if you are approaching, for example, politicians or legislators, they have to see gain from what you're saying, and therefore it's very strategic who you approach, meaning that they must see also that they are gaining. So you say that direct incentives, but again we'll cover those in the next session. How you really do that. Then advocacy, there comes to a more professional and more in-depth look at the policies. You have research, policy analysis, and for that, again, you look at resource mobilization, because, again, if you're going to look at policy and change, your work will require resources and also more analysis on, can that policy really work? Like what Afef has just told us, it's been several years, and you have to really get people on board, even from the budgeting and all that. So this is, again, when we look at advocacy and stressing and emphasizing that we should try to move from campaigning activities that we are doing and graduate them towards real advocacy, it means that we have to do more and more analysis, and it requires a bit of more expertise, a bit of work, and a more in-depth sort of analysis of the situation in each country. So the finally is, how do you do it, in a quick diagrammatical sort of presentation? How do you plan for your advocacy? Just 4 things. What do you want to change? Again, this is some of you may be familiar with like a canvas, but this is what do you want to change, identify that problem. It's very important because that will be the thing that you want. So you have campaigned because you have an issue. So that issue must be clear. Then who can affect the decision that you want, that needs to be made to bring the change? Then the message that you are using to carry that particular change, because there has always been to be a message, a message, a message. And I know most of the NGOs know how to do messaging. And we also have this messaging that comes from them. For example, the WHO, love that, and then the message that you're saying that will influence that change and also mobilize. Then what you do, identify and mobilize the required resources, very important, so that avoids a lot of frustrations. And this is where we look at towards the end. Why do we always talk in our capacity building initiatives of planning for action? An action plan gives you a realistic picture of whether you're able to go towards your goal. If not, so you need to mobilize resources and also look at what can be done within the time frame that you have. So you prepare and implement, but all the time you are monitoring and evaluating to make sure that you are within what your objective is aimed to get. So preparation, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation is how the process is. But in our next sessions, if there's no quick question, is we look in depth on all this, for example, the how here. We'll cover more and also look at the in-depth analysis of policy and all those legal systems to give you a better insights on really how do you put things on the table when you are saying now I'm moving, the campaign has ended, now I want to move to the next level. So this will be the end of that session. I hope I did not eat so much into the time. I think we are good. So is there any comment, question, and maybe on the chat, anything that is there any question? Just feel free to raise your hand. Assume we are in face-to-face and you are able to raise your hand. So
can you please just elaborate the evaluation part?
Okay, yeah, great. So I'm saying, yeah, in monitor and evaluate. So in the way this canvas is working, like you are moving from preparation. So you look at what you need, what is the problem, and who can affect that decision. So then you implement. Preparation is usually you are looking at like say you are looking at who have you consulted the right people, have you really done your data collection to see whether is that a problem or not. Is there evidence coming from other areas showing that if this is done, then we can save lives here? So you have done all that. Then you are looking at, if that is the case, when you're looking at the second green color here, the dark green, what can affect decision making? Which other organizations have same aims, identify and involve allies, all that? As I'm saying, so here you're looking at gaining that support, allies, as we say, call them allies and advocates, people who can also work on your behalf, people who can join you, and then you are looking at what is the message that you want to deliver. This is the change you want to make, the strategic actions, the set the goals and the objectives. Now, when you have that, then what do you need to do? So this is the how you are actually planning for advocacy. So it's not, you have not really like implement, but planning for the advocacy. So you prepare, and then you have this, as you put your message, as you are sort of mobilizing the required resources, in monitoring evaluation, what you're doing is that at each of these, ideally, this should be here at the center. When you're looking at what you're trying to influence and the problem, the targets, you need to always be cognizant of the fact that the situation may change. And therefore, if something changes, you cannot stick with the same problem if it has been solved. A quick example would be, for example, when COVID pandemic came, some things that we were fighting for so much changed quickly. Some places could have been something to do with maybe speeding or drunk driving or seatbelt. Something could have changed. So you need to be changed. So that's why you monitor and evaluate at every level, actually at every level. So to answer your question, monitoring and evaluation will be at every level of your planning or preparation or implementation and so on. Yeah. Okay, any other final question? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you so much.
Okay, so any other final question before I?
Yes, Patrick.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it means all three, campaign, lobbying, and advocacy, must go through preparation, implementation, and the monitoring and evaluation.
Yes, yes, correct. And the purpose of this, again, not to confuse you, is that here we are edging more, and I want everybody to move with me. We are edging more towards advocacy because we have no problem with campaigning, at least we know, and this is, we are looking at how do you, if you want to actually talk about changing policy, how do you prepare? So some of these elements are obtained from lobbying, from campaigning. So doesn't mean that this is particularly on just advocacy, but you are borrowing some key elements, 4 key elements that must be put into place. So you're looking at the preparation where you're looking at what you need to change. That has to be there. But in advocacy, you must have the support, the partnerships, the allies. Then you must have the actual thing you want. What is the message? And the message will be contained, like when we talk about what is the demand. That's what we do when we are doing a campaign. People are demanding this. You turn that demand into an ask. You are asking the government, and that ask, you're looking for a commitment. So you have it very clear. So you see, as you move into those levels, that's like ground tables, you already have that message. But most important is now, what do you do? This is what we'll be covering. The last orange box here, this is what we'll be looking at. What do you do? How do you do it? How do you identify the policy and mobilize resources to do that? So this is what this training is targeting here in the last box. So this can be obtained from campaigning and lobbying, but then you are going to need to do this more intensely as we go forward. Is that okay, the question?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right. So now I want to pull a poll before I give floor to Vale. Martin, can you pull the poll? Let me stop sharing. A quick poll on, okay. Yeah, this poll is going to ask you just how you rate yourself in advocacy, understanding from campaigning, lobbying to advocacy. Just feel free to see from your current understanding of advocacy, how would you rate your performance in achieving advocacy outcomes as an NGO in the last 5 years?
Patrick, let me know when you would like the poll to be ended. It's been almost 1 minute now.
We have a few, like 1 minute more. We are at 71%. Let's see.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, I think it has stagnated at 77. That's quite good. Yeah, we can stop the poll and pull the results. Okay. Okay. So this is based on your understanding of what advocacy should actually achieve. And then, so we have 18% is low, 60% are saying is medium. What I'd like us to see is, if based on your understanding at this level and what you've been doing, we are saying that majority are saying that the outcomes have been at the medium. Now, how can we increase this to a high? Maybe based on the concept and the insights we learned from this training, and also the post-training actions that we need to pull up. And are we going to, when you talk of the advocacy outcomes, mostly I was thinking about, legislation, policy, something to do with the law. So at medium, at 6%, I think, yeah. Let's see how to be reflected maybe later after we hear from Valeria and from EASST, from Emily. Okay. Thank you. So we can save the poll, Martin. So we're good.
Perfect. You're not seeing it.
All right. So I think my time is up for now. I'll give this chance to Vale to come in.
Hi, I'm here. I'm going to share my screen now.
Yes.
Okay, let me put on presentation mode. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and good evening for some of you. I'm Valeria Mota. I think most of you, I know you, but I'm the partnerships manager of the Alliance. I study law, so I am a lawyer, even though I don't practice. But when Patrick was talking and we were kind of brainstorming about this training, one of the things that we realized is that many times, and myself included when I was working in Uruguay at Fundación Gonzalo Rodríguez, one of the things that happens, or usually where we can get stuck, is that we don't know how to navigate our legal system, right? We have our advocacy plan, we have our campaign plan, but there's a moment where we reach doors that actually are not working for us because maybe we are knocking the doors that are not adequate for the type of policy change that we're looking for. So in this session, my idea is to invite you to ask some key questions that maybe you have not been asking, give some basic concepts on how to understand your legal system. I'm not going to talk specifically because we have people from over 40 countries, so it's impossible to be super specific, but the basic kind of concepts so you can start looking the information in the right way and start asking certain questions if you want to move forward in your advocacy plan. So from what we're talking, right, from campaigning to actually proposing a new law, regulation, decree, and that actually it's approved by the authority that is competent to give that approval. Okay? If you have any questions, please raise your hand. Martin will help us because this might be a bit technical or a different type of information that you're used to receive from Alliance courses or training. So let me know if I'm being, if there's something that you're not understanding or some concept that we need to review, okay? Cool, I'll assume that that's fine. So when I'm talking about asking the key questions, I'm thinking of, do you know what's your country legal system or the hierarchy? And by this, I mean, do you know if your country has a federal system or if you have a unitary system? And do you know what that does mean for you to present or to advocate for policy changes? Then something important is to ask yourself, do you know why or how this can affect your advocacy plans? Do you know how laws and regulations are created in your country? Like, because many of you might imagine that, okay, regulations are created by legislators, parliamentarians, MPs, or by a minister. Well, it depends on your system. There are several options that we're going to explore later today. Do you know where to look for that information? So do you know where you can learn how's your system or how is the hierarchy of your system? Where should you look for that? That's not in the newspapers, that's not a research paper done by academia. Where can you get that information? Then, do you know who can be your technical allies? So who could help you in navigating the system and what else you need to ensure besides the approval of a law or regulation? Because this is a second kind of issue that we have identified and that many of you have shared with us, that you've been advocating for 3 years, 4 years, you get the law approved by the parliament, but then the law is not implemented. So do you know what else you need to ensure, or it needs to be part of your advocacy plan in advance? Okay, good. Right, I'm gonna keep going. I saw there was a question on the chat, but Martin, just please let me know if the question is for me specifically.
Yeah, it's not right now.
Okay, cool. All right, so first things first, let's navigate our legal system or legal order, or in Spanish, I'm just gonna say this because I don't know how to translate this in English, but it would be ordenamiento jurídico territorial. So it's the order according to your the laws, but also how geographically distributed is your country. So the first question that you need to understand is, do you have a federal system or a unitary system? Federal systems are those similar to Argentina, to Brazil, to the United States. where each state has, it's very separate from the central government, right? So each state has their own parliament, there has their own regulations, and think that only the state can actually change. And we have colleagues from several countries, some of those countries here, and you know how hard India probably is also a federal state, how hard it is to move forward national laws or national regulations there. Then the other thing that you need to ask yourself is, who is the authority that has the competency to change that specific regulation or to like regulate that specific matter? So the first question is understanding if your system is federal or unitary. Once you understand that, you have to check for, and I'm going to put a very simple example. You want to change speed limits, right? So if you speed limits, you probably have 3 different levels. You will have roads in the cities, you will have roads between states, and then you will have highways that goes across the whole country. Probably, depending what type of road you are trying to change, you will have a different authority that is going to be competent on that. With this, I'm saying, like, if you wanted to change 30 kilometers for streets in cities, then you need to find out who is the authority that can regulate city level speed limits. Okay? I know it's a bit tricky, but bear with me and ask me the questions you want. So where are the like, if we're looking the hierarchy, where is the competencies stated? The first document that you could check is your constitution, right? In the constitution, it's where the country decided who has the power for what. So in the constitution, you will find what are the mandates for the Ministry of Transport, what are the mandates for the parliament, and what are the mandates for, let's say, the state level or the regional level authorities. That could be a mayor, that could be a governor, depending on the wording, on how it's called in each country, right? But usually in the constitution is where you will find the competencies of each authority. So if now we go to what is the kind of like the hierarchy, so the first level here on the top, you have the constitution. Then you have, I'm putting here national law, but it could be a national regulation. So it depends how it's called. In some countries, for instance, in the state, they are called acts, right? So, but just get kind of like the global concept. And then on a third level, you have specific regulations. Even the specific regulations could be national, could be regional or local. Why I'm saying specific regulations? Because sometimes you have a national law. Let's say that you have a national traffic law that gives some kind of like standards or minimums that needs to be complied. And I'm gonna put another example here. Let's talk about helmets, because I heard someone was sharing the experience of the helmet, right, in India. So imagine that you have a national law that gives the minimum standard of the minimum quality standard for the helmet. Then probably you need a specific regulation that can be national, and that can be a decree that will say when that law is gonna start and be into place, and what's the window that retailers have to start bringing the helmets or start selling the helmets with that minimum standard. So be aware of that sometimes it's not getting the law approved, you might get other steps. And then some specific regulations, going back to the speed limit example, can be regional or local, because in some countries, for instance, the speed limits of streets in residential areas are the competency of the regional or local leader, so of a mayor or a governor, okay? So just like to sum up this part, check what type of system you have in your country, understand that, then it would be useful for you to have a first approximation to your constitution to understand who does what, and then according to what policy you want to change, understand at what level you will have to work, okay? Any questions on this? No? Right, I'm moving forward. Okay, so then the question that is attached to what we're saying, like, who is the actual decision maker, right? So it is a minister. We have here Ángela María Orozco, she's the Minister of Transport of Colombia. It is the legislators, this could be national or state or regional, or it is your mayor, you know, like here, Anne Hidalgo, she's the mayor from Paris. So once you have identified a bit of your legal system and identify how the hierarchy works, you need to start asking who is the actual decision maker that will have the power or the authority to change that. So, and I'm saying this just to make your efforts as effective as possible, which doesn't mean that you can find other champions. It doesn't mean that if you have a good connection with the minister, even though it's a competency of the parliament, you can go and with your minister and present at the parliament. I'm not saying that you cannot keep working with your champions. I'm just saying be aware who is the actual authority that can change that. Okay, and then another thing that I wanted to share with you is how can laws and regulations be developed in your country? And I'm gonna do like Patrick. I'm just gonna choose 3 names, and I would like to hear from you if you know how laws and regulations are created in your country. So, for instance, let's see here, so we don't pick the same people as always. I have Lucky, are you there? Lucky Moldausi?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Lucky, do you know in your country how laws or regulations can be developed?
I think basically it's through, it normally starts with the NGOs, the lobbying from interest groups to politicians to the provincial parliament to the national parliament, and normally it gets voted by the National Assembly. We are through that minister, and then if it gets approved, there's a white paper for public interest where the public will comment. Then there's a green paper again, and after the green paper is where it will be checked legalities if the matter of course of the constitution are in place. Then the president will sign. But it will be after the national consultation with the various groups and through different parliamentary portfolio committees. So it gets debated in parliament, and there's various committees in parliament that debate the matter further. And if everything is done accordingly and if it's checked, then the president of the country can sign it to a law.
Okay, thank you. Julian, can you share with us what do you know on how laws or other type of regulations are developed in Malaysia?
Right, thanks, Valerie. It was good that you showed the hierarchy between the laws and the regulation. Because what we found over here back in our country, there are some traffic issues which goes under regulation. So when it goes under regulation, where it just needs the minister's signature to get that particular regulation to be effective. Whereas there are certain aspects which needs law. When the moment it touches law, then it has to go to the parliament. So if we know which areas goes under regulation, which areas goes under law, that will be very helpful for us to actually plan our advocacy program with the ministries. Thanks.
Exactly, Kulan. Exactly. And then just to have one more voice, let's see, from Latin America, Vivian, that I see you there. Do you know in Argentina how laws or regulations are developed?
Hello, everybody. Yes, I do know. It all depends on what we want to change. If we want something at the local level, then we have to go to the mayors. If we want something to change in our province, then we have to go to the legislation in each of the provinces. And we can go at the national level, which is very, very important to achieve a change at national level. But then anyway, we have to go down again to each of the provinces, as you said at the beginning, because each of the provinces afterwards have to accept this national law. So it's going back and forth nationally and then afterwards regionally.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you all of you for sharing how it's in your countries. So I think that many of you have quite clear to understand who is the authority with the competency so you can plan your advocacy. But what I was asking, guys, was that how a law can be developed. And most of you answered like either by the legislative power, so legislators, or executive power, and that would be mayors or ministries. And that's correct. Most of the countries you have what's called initiatives, legal-wise, and you have what's called presidential initiatives, and that comes from the executive power, president, minister, or executing agencies. That depends on the country. Again, you need to check in your constitution if these agencies have that power. Then is the legislative initiative, and that comes either from one legislator, it can be from a bloc of a party, so as the initiative of a party itself, or it can be from a special commission. As most of the parliaments in the world, they usually have special commissions for specific topics. So you have the Public Health Commission, Gender Commission, Transport Commission. Usually road safety issues are either touched through the Public Health or the Transport Commission. But in some countries, and especially those with continental law, and by this I mean those that follow the French and Spanish system, so that's mainly for Latin America and some countries in Europe, we have what's called popular initiative. So that means that the society can actually develop a proposal, gather a percentage of signatures, and that can be presented as a project to the parliament. And the parliament mandatory needs to give course to that and revise that. I wanted to give this slide not for you to say to you, okay, start campaigning, get signatures to create a new law, but for you to be aware that sometimes it's not only at the initiative of the legislators or a specific minister. You usually have other avenues, and that is something that you can explore. And in particular with the legislative power, I know that many of you work directly with legislators or one or two politicians, but what if one way of doing advocacy start working with a party? Well, or presenting to all the parties. I know that one of the important things that we have the NGOs is to be politically independent. So of course, you're not going to align to only one party, the right, the left, the center, but many parties and many legislators respond to their party. So if the party approves something, they have to bring it forward at the parliament. So have that in mind as well. It's just to give like pinpoints new ideas, so you can have a bit more options. Okay. Any questions about this? No. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so here, sorry, I missed the title here, but this is to talk about a bit who are your allies, right? Because we're talking about very technical things. So, okay, one thing that I believe that are your allies, and I haven't seen many NGOs in the road safety field doing, it's working with pro bono lawyers. Working with pro bono lawyers, it's going to help you if you're at advocacy state that you want to present something. It's going to help you first to understand your legal system easily, so then you don't have to read your constitution, just ask someone. And when you're planning your advocacy, you can have a bit more of a clear choice of action, because they can say, well, I mean, if you want to change this, better go this way, better go that way. And by pro bono, I mean in-kind donation, I mean zero, you're not going to pay. And pro bono lawyers usually, I mean, lawyers in general, usually are quite well connected. So this could be also another door for you to open for further advocacy and further campaigning in the future on other topics. Usually what works best is going to the big law firms, because they usually have hours that they had to give pro bono. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that most pro bono, most lawyer partners of big law firms know someone who was involved in a road crash. So, I mean, unfortunately, road crashes are something super close to all of us. So have that in mind and start thinking of lawyers as a good ally or a good technical partner that you should get on board. Then I would say engineers, and I'm thinking here because imagine that you're trying to present a proposal on a specific thing that you wants to be changed, and it's good to have the technical backup. So imagine that you want to present a law about helmets, or you want to present a law about seatbelts, or a child restraint system, or school transport. It's important that that proposal of the law that you want to change has data. And here I'm not talking about only the data like the breakdown in the crashes. I'm talking about the hardcore data, what material is better for a helmet over another one, etc. And those colleagues working on helmet probably have seen a lot of these studies. I remember Kulan, when we were in Malaysia in 2017, one of the demonstrations that they organized was an engineer explaining the substandard helmets, and it was crashing a substandard helmet with a good helmet, and the substandard obviously was broken down. And there was a study on that. So get technical allies on board as well. Doctors and health professionals also will help you if you want to put forward a law. Usually laws or regulations, usually the method that they are written down, they have a first paragraph or introduction that is the justification. So it's always good to have the medical numbers behind you. And they can be also, I mean, unions of doctors are usually quite strong in many countries, and I'm not saying that you're going to invite them to strike, but you could have them also on your side for the technical aspects. And then obviously politicians, but only the good ones, as this lady from New Zealand. This was just a joke, but yeah, politicians, of course, that you need to have as allies, and it's important for you to get them on board as well. Because even if you, going back to the different initiatives to present a law, if you want to do the legislative initiative, you need to have legislator to present it for you. If this is a presidential initiative, you need someone in the executive power. And if it's the popular, it's always good to have it endorsed by politicians in general. Okay, so what is next, right? So like, now that you know that you have to navigate your legal system, that you know what are the questions that you have to do, what else you need to ask yourself? So it's important to know if you need a specific regulation after the law. And this is exactly what I was talking about regarding the helmets or the child restraint or the seatbelts. Usually after you have a law establishing the standards or the height or the weight for the child restraint or the type of material for the seatbelt, usually you need another specific regulation that gives a window for retailers to have that gives many times economic incentives. So it's not only about the content of the base law or the general law, it's also about like the steps after. You need to ask yourself if there is a budget in place. We have seen many countries where laws were approved for different measures, but there was no budget, so it was impossible to implement it. So when you're doing your advocacy plan, you need to make sure, if you're going to advocate, that law includes that the budget will be reviewed in the next budget review by the parliament, or that the budget is going to be covered by the executive agency. But have that in mind. Again, for this, the pro bono lawyers are the ones that can help you when you start drafting or working on the content that you think that law should have. And then again, who is the authority to implement it? That is a key question and very important. And if you need an enforcement law for that, because also it happens many times, let's say that you get the approval for a decree or a law for 30 kilometers per hour, but then there's no mandate for the enforcers to enforce that. So if we don't get all this road done, you might get like the nice headline, but then it's not going to be implemented, and then it's not going to be enforced. So you're going to still be stuck in the middle. So I don't want to discourage you. This is to encourage you and show, like, trying to give more tools on how to, what are the things you need to check, but have that in mind. And yeah. Before we go to we're gonna do now a bit of a conversation with two members. Before that, is there any questions about what I just shared?
Valeria, let me jump in. There's been conversation going on the chat. Maybe you can help sort of shed some light on this. So the approach from the bigger level to the smaller level. For example, started with the conversation started with the Akulan looking at, is it easier to start at a smaller authorities like the local, the mayor, or do you target the bigger, the national? And when do you decide that? And then, of course, different opinions are being put together. A city level approach would be more effective. But then on the converse, when their decisions are made from the higher level, like national level or federal level, they are usually very quickly to be implemented because they have a budget and all that. So what would be your advice there for looking at it? What would be like the approach? Would there be a specific way to look at, is it small or big? Where do you target?
So these are two different things, because one would be the strategy that you want to set. The information that I was giving here was depending on at what level you want to change things, and considering what type of thing you want to change, who has the authority to change it. From a strategic point of view, if you're hoping for quick wins and get kind of a domino effect, then I would say go to the city level, because it's where, well, I wouldn't say city level, I would say go where you have the best network. Because that's the thing, if you have a better network at a national level, then going to a city where you know no one will make no difference. So from a strategic point of view, go from where you have the best network. If that is a city level, aim for a domino effect. Aim to get one city, then another city, then another city, and maybe 2 or 3, and build a case study and take that to the parliament. If the parliament is the one that can regulate that topic. But the first question, the first basic question that you need to ask is what you want to change, at what level you want to change it, and according to that, who has the authority to approve that change or not. I don't know if that answers the question. I was reading now through, I think it was Pulan.
And maybe I have an example that actually is quite relevant for the NGOs, because this is what we have done and we are doing, we keep doing about the 30-kilometer legislation. So you remember we had sent out a survey saying, have you seen 30 kilometers around your areas, communities? And you said yes, some said no. Those who had said yes, we said, can you go further and see, is that 30-kilometer signage regulated by law or not? We found that at some 67% was yes, the other one was no. So then we wanted further to see who made it possible that people are regulating their own local without any law. Is it, so you say, if in the local level, if there's no law and people are saying we need the 30, if you want to change that strategically into law, what would you do? Would you go to the main one, or would you start with the city mayor or the whoever it is at the local authority to say that the community demands this, because already they have accepted, but they need that to be embedded in law so that, as I say, it's a permanent change, is bringing a change. On the other hand, if something violates the law of that kilometer where there is no law, actually it's an informal law within the community. For example, a good example where I am in Kenya, that the people, 30 kilometers is good, but it's not the law. The law is 50. So if you are speeding and you are within 50, so and there is no law to actually say that you are breaking the law of 30, because that is not the law. But people say that is okay. So it's a kind of quick dynamics. I'm looking at how you look at that. It can be either way. And followed with that question, there was that argument about elections, timings, on all this. What would be the best? Maybe Vale,
again, I think that is again about how strategic you want to be. Of course, elections are a great time for you to get, either because the one leaving it's going to be reelected, so wants to get like good headlines, or because they want to get things done before leaving, or because you can get the commitment for those in race for the seat, wherever that seat is, either it's a president, a mayor, or the parliament. I have used that, like the election card. I have used it not only working at Fundación Gonzalo Rodriguez, but I have used it when I was working in another organization that is nothing to do with road safety. And it always worked. Like you get politicians to listen to, and you get the media attention, which in my part, I was not focusing kind of like on the advocacy and kind of like the strategy and the PR that you can do. What I was focusing was on the technical aspects. Technically, you might find a parliament that if they have a majority of the party in power, they probably will rush to get things approved before the period ends. So in that way, if you have a politician, let's say a parliamentarian from the party that has the majority of votes, yes, it makes sense before an election try to rush things, because they might not get a majority again, or they might not get approved. And if there's something that is close to their interest, yes, they will rush to do so. So from a technical point of view, that's what I would say. Be aware of that. Like, think if the politician you're working with has the majority of the parliament or not. And this could be at a city level and at a national level.
Was that a question in? Yeah, okay. So Vale, there's something else that is coming up, and maybe I think that a bit of more emphasis. Martin, are we able to trace who is that?
Sorry, Patrick?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The issue of pro bono experts on this, whether they're engineers, lawyers, is actually something I think we need, especially for it's not actually knowledge out there that is very quick that it's possible to get them. But there's always, I think, a second layer of pro bonoism whereby lawyers need to be paid, but are you able to create? I'm looking at what kind of tactics in approaching this pro bono, because some could be very willing because maybe they have a passion for road safety or passion for certain aspects. But in as much as we'll have some bit of sharings from Brett and Vivian on how they have done a bit on the policy and who they approached and whether they had those experts. But if you don't get any expert who will volunteer, what do you do? Do you get stuck there, or is there any other layer? I have one idea maybe, and I'll let somebody also, maybe you can share ideas on how do you approach this pro bono. I can see one, there's someone has shared an organization, www.trust.org. I think
Emily shared a website of pro bono lawyers that are matched to NGOs. What I would suggest is that you need to be, when you're asking for help, as anything in your life, I think you need to be as clear as possible. And especially if you're going to request for pro bono assistance of any kind, of any expert. So you need to be conscious of their time and you need to understand exactly what you're asking. I think that hopefully with a bit of this information, we had given you kind of the base to understand what are depending on what are your advocacy plans, but imagine that what your advocacy aim actually is to draft a law because you're tired of reading bad laws created by the parliament. You want to draft a real one that has the real standard for the helmets, all the technical aspects. You need to be super clear exactly of what you're going to ask. Because if you're going to ask the lawyer, I need you to help me draft the law, that's one thing. If you're going to ask the lawyer, I need you to help me to understand how's the legal system of my country, that's another thing. And I think that's the first thing. Have super clear what you need. And then I would say do a power mapping. You know, this is about your network. So I would suggest do a power mapping and check if from these big law firms, you have people within your network that are connected there. And a personal introduction is always the best way to do so. This obviously can depend on cultural different realities in each region or even each country. So you are the ones who know that best. But what I would suggest, first of all, is do the power mapping. Do the power mapping and check who is there. And obviously, then you can, or it could be also in the first place, you can use these type of resources that Emily just shared with us on the chat, which is a website that matches NGOs with lawyers, and it actually worked. We actually have used it in the Alliance, a website like that, and we have been in contact, and yeah, it does work. So don't think that you're just filling a form and nothing happens. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, Patrick.
Yeah, I think it gives a wider view of what is possible, and also, as you're saying, looking at strategically what you need to do. But there could be, a variety of ways, a variety of approaches. And I said, I think I always insist about reflecting back as you move forward, so that you're able to keep your monitoring system always with your antenna up, like is not working or is working. And you remember the first slide, we are talking about that analysis of the policy, laws and all that. And we said there could be some technical bits that need to be identified. And that's why you identify whether you need the engineers, is it a helmet, is it about child restraint systems? And then again, the idea of mapping out not only about that, looking at people your allies and your advocates, allies who can support you, whether they are manufacturers and they are not even advocates, but they are able to come in and say, okay, this is going to improve our sales, and therefore we can support you with an engineer pro bono, who will go and actually help to draft this kind of regulation.
And even, sorry, one more thing, Patrick. If you're still at that place where you don't completely understand how's your legal system, fetch a university student. Talk to a local university with the law school, and that's the best. They're going to be eager to tell you, because this is understanding your legal system is the first 2 or 3 years of your career when you're still in love with the career. So you're going to be quite happy to share your knowledge. Maybe later they're looking for money, but yeah, fetch the university. That also will help.
Okay. So
there's a hand raised here.
There's a hand raised here.
Yeah.
Okay, who is this? Let me see.
David Frost.
Ah, David Frost, yes, go ahead. Yeah, I think.
Patrick, thank you. Valeria, I think your last summation, I think, is something that an NGO needs to really look at, where you said you've actually got to write the law. It's almost like a public relations officer. You know, you've hit the sweet spot when the newspaper publishes your press release verbatim. Then you know you've hit the spot. And it's got to be something like this as well. And these 4 points on this slide are so key. It's all like being a revolutionary. You've got to identify the popular cause. And once the popular cause is there, that the seed is amongst the people, it'll be easy for you to get the assistance of the lawyer, the engineer, and to actually be able to write that law the way you want it. But it's got to be a popular cause. And I worked in government for 42 years, and you've got to understand that. So if you go to government, you've actually got to come with something ready that they can just take and work with. So I like that. And the other thing that NGOs should also understand is that second, is there a budget in place? I think they need to understand the process of budgeting in government. And government here in South Africa, where I worked, was we work on a 3 to 5 year cycle. So you've got to almost preempt that and know where exactly in the cycle of budgeting they are, so that at the right spot, you can actually get it in to your budget. Because government officials are just going to say to you, sorry, there's no money. This is not budgeted for. So if you plan your draft legislation or the draft that you're wanting, you need to have done the homework ahead to see that the budget is in place for that. So these things run so sequentially on each other. And then what was also the little pyramid that you had earlier on in terms of the sectors and the layers of government is very key, that you pitch it absolutely at the right spot in terms of the government. It doesn't help you go to national government and it's a local authority issue. You've got to pitch that. Yeah, there we go. I see you've done that. So that is absolutely key. And then if it's not a popular cause, your enforcement agency is not going to enforce it either. And this is one of the issues that I've experienced in our country. I think we've got very progressive seatbelt and child restraint laws in South Africa, but they're not enforced the way they should be. If only they were enforced, we would reduce fatalities by between 20 and 30% of passengers in vehicles. So I think, just to sum up what you're saying, yes, is absolutely important, and it goes about the research that you've got to do as well, and the homework that the NGO must do to be able to do this. So before you even think you've got a popular cause, there's a lot of work to be done. Just some comments from my side.
Absolutely.
Thank you, David. I think my time is up, Patrick. I really don't want to. Sorry, I could be. So yeah, I'm going to mute myself. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat, and we will figure it out to get the answers to all of you after the training. Right, Patrick? Yeah.
Yes, great. But thank you very much, Valeria, and also for the contributions from the participants. So maybe in a nutshell is to say, and maybe Vale had actually won and said a bit of technical here that now, but it also gives us time to start thinking that, okay, so how do we move from the everyday activities that we do to make the change? Otherwise, we might be doing, like, standing at the same place, doing the same activities, but at what moment we need to influence that, push for that. So there will be a lot of, like David has said, homework, going deeper and deeper to look at the policies. I want us to pick on what Vale has shared with us, and I want to have 2 case examples of 2 NGOs that have been able to navigate through what Valeria has just described, And they are going to quickly tell us what they wanted to change, who they identified, whether there was any pro bono experts and all that, and what change they achieved, and how long maybe they took, as well as the challenges and how they were able to surmount, to learn lessons from that as they move forward with their work. So I have two NGOs. I had actually asked them to prepare a bit on 5 minutes to say in a nutshell how they did it. And one where we have Kenya example, Bright, and then we have Argentina, Vivian. So I'll start with Bright. Give us a quick rundown of this legal process, how you navigated through, what change you wanted, as well as whether you achieved it, and so far, what was your experience, negative, and also the lessons that you learned and the achievement. So, and then after that, Vivian will come in and also give us that rundown. Then we'll have a 2 minutes question, and then we'll move to the next session. So the floor is yours, Bright, if you're ready. Just give us a rundown.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. And I hope that I'm clear.
Yes, you are.
All right. So as an organization, together with other organization, I led a process through which we were looking for putting in place a law that would focus on school safety, both school transportation and for the children that were walking to and from school. Up to that point, there was no law that focused on children. It had 4 segments. One, it was looking for speed limits of 30 kilometers per hour. It looks like we are a bit ahead of time on that one. Signage, speed calming measures, including walkways and cycle tracks around schools and barriers to separate users. Thirdly, there was a regulation of school transport, such that we have safety features in school buses. In Kenya at that point, when a truck or a bus gets old, that's when it became a school bus, and it's removed from carrying passengers to taking children to school, which was an issue of concern. And then lastly, statutory fines that we were prescribing in the law. So what we did was we knew from the onset the process of making law in our country, and like it has already been described, this was a national law, and therefore there are 3 ways that could happen. One, through a popular initiative where communities sign up to 1 million signatures, it's taken to parliament, then the researchers there take it up. Secondly, a line ministry, Minister of Health, Minister of Transport, Interior, whichever ministry feels like they want to change something, they draft something and they take it to parliament, the process begins. Or thirdly, a private member in parliament, through either from civil society, can look for a private member that can make it a private process, but through parliament as well. And that's the route we took. So we identified a member of parliament who we thought was neutral in the sense that we are divided along party lines in my country. So this member of parliament, one, had already processed a bill before that was of public interest, and secondly, he seemed to have influence on both sides of the party, opposition and government. And so the process was we started with the drafting, and we didn't do it ourselves. We engaged a lawyer for technical input, and we worked together with the WHO and GRSP at that time, who were funding a project then. We focused on different caucuses in parliament. Once we drafted, it had to go through the parent ministry, Minister of Transport. They had their input. They even added value added some clauses on it. It had to go to the Attorney General because that's the procedure. He gave it a nod that it was okay to proceed. And so then we took it to parliament through a private member. And the process is that there have to be 3 readings in parliament before it is debated and assented, taken to the president for assent. So we worked with different caucuses. Youth parliamentarians have a caucus in parliament, women parliamentarians. We also had a group of pediatric doctors who were able to come up with a statement through media. We worked with school authorities, the Ministry of Education. Time will fail me to give you the details of each of those, but you get a picture of what we did. So caucus meetings, we used social media, we had round tables, mainstream media, we tagged several MPs on their Twitter tags, in their Facebook. But before we got there, we definitely had done research that was based on best practice, research that we involved the schools to give us to have call logs where they presented the numbers of children that were dying. The bill was vetted to see whether it was a money bill, and I like the fact that most of those things I'm talking about have already been explained. And if it was going to be a money bill, we have a devolved system of government. We have a National Assembly, and then we have a Senate. If it was a money bill, meaning was it going to cost government more, then it would have gone to the Senate, but it was found out by the researchers in Parliament that was not a money bill, so we only had to work with the National Assembly, which made it a little easier. So of the 4 things that I stated, when the bill was processed, we got 3 out of the 4. We got the school transport regulation. Now, if you come to Kenya, you can easily identify a school bus because first of the color, and then there was the issue of safety features. There were the issue of the speed calming measures was passed as law. The only thing that we didn't get 100% when we were looking for 30 kilometers speed limit, we got 50 kilometer speed limit, and that's food for there's work to be done there now that we are coming back to look at 30 kilometers in other places. So what did we achieve? We actually got the law signed by the president. From Parliament, after 3 readings, it goes to the president, it becomes law. But it took a very long time. It took 3 years because there was a back and forth. Sometimes the law would be published on an order paper. In our country, we have what we call order papers that are published. So you know the business of Parliament today, if it's going to be sitting tomorrow. And our champion parliamentarians would tell us it's coming on tomorrow. So we would text, we would call, we would ask the friendly members of Parliament to be in Parliament on that day. So when the debate comes, they would be there. When a vote comes, they would be there. Sometimes he would withdraw it depending on what other matter would be discussed. If it's a very political matter that was going to be discussed on that day, he would tell us, and then he would say we would rather withdraw that discussion from that day. So it took a long time. And after 3 years, we were able to have the law signed, the bill signed into law, and it became an act. And we amended the main act of transport, which is the Transport Act of Kenya. And we had several challenges. It was not just a smooth sailing. Convincing Parliament that this was an important issue in the midst of other matters that they were dealing with took us a while, and that's why we thought we would work with the caucuses. So in each caucus, we had at least somebody who understood the law, understood why we were doing it, understood the essence of it, and were able to speak on our behalf. And then there was the issue of the parliamentary calendar that varied, and always political issues were preeminent. Whenever there was a hot political issue, everything else was dropped, calendar was changed, and our issue was put in the back burner, but we kept pushing, we kept meeting, we kept reminding. We did video clips, would run them through mainstream media, why 30 kilometers is important, why we need to protect our children. We had opposition from school transporters because the fact that it was not a money bill for government, it was a money bill for private companies that were transporting children. It meant that they had to paint their vans differently. They had to put in some safety measures that they had not budgeted for. So for that, it needed public participation. Therefore, we were able to hold public participation forum. So that again delayed the process. So finally, what lessons did we learn? We actually learned that the NGOs and civil society can play a critical role in changing the road safety landscape. It takes patience, it takes a back and forth, but it is possible. The other thing we learned for sure, and we have been told that we need to understand the issue that we want changed very well. We must have the evidence. We must also understand the process of making law so that we can anticipate what we do when. We go back and forth, we review. When we think we need to move forward, we move. When we think we need to retract, we retract, depending on the climate. And again, it was important, we learned that it was important to choose a parliamentarian that is not controversial, that will not be not accepted by one side of parliament, by a group of parliamentarians, or standing for issues that are of public interest. So again, we learned that a champion is very important, and the kind of champion you choose sometimes will determine whether your law is moved forward or not. Is it a person that is able to mobilize? Is it a person that is able to communicate well? So in a nutshell, that's what we did. And after the law was passed, of course, some aspects of that law needed regulations. So beyond the law itself, again, we got the same legal mind that drafted regulations. Now this was being done at the ministry level. So that now shifted from parliament to the ministry. So some of those aspects of the law have been implemented. Some of them are work in progress, and there are yet some that they are still not implemented. So enforcement is still a big issue, but at least we have a framework within which we can work. And when we go back to review the 50 to 30 kilometers, I believe now we will have polished our skills, and I believe we'll do a much better job moving forward. So I think that's it in a nutshell. I was given that little time, and that's all I can explain for now.
Thank you very much, Bright. Leaving it there, the framework is in place. You see, the framework is in place, which is usually the first thing. Without a framework, there's nowhere you can go for reference and all that. But thank you very much for that. I hope we have at least obtained some of the insights from there and seen the journey and the challenges, as well as how you can surmount those challenges. I'll give the floor to Vivian. Vivian, give us also, I think I'll give you extra minutes, but you have about 5 to 7 minutes. If you can give us a rundown of what happened in Argentina with that particular policy. Vivian?
Yes, hello everybody. Well, first of all, what I have to say is that I'm not a lawyer, that I wasn't involved in road safety until my son here in Argentina was killed. That's why, well, I won't speak so specifically like Valeria did, but I'm going to explain how through personal experience we were able to change a law. When my son, I always have him here next to me, my son Kevin, when he was killed, I was immediately told that it was an accident and that I just had to accept what had happened. I knew that it wasn't an accident because the driver that ran over my son, he was going at double the speed limit allowed. He ran over my son and he escaped. And because of that, I wasn't able to know, my family wasn't able to know if he was under the influence of any drug or of alcohol. It took us 5 years to reach an oral hearing. And the witnesses who were Kevin's friends and were with him at the moment, they were 15 when it happened. And when they had to go to court, they were 21. Luckily for them, they didn't remember many of the details of what had happened that night, but it wasn't good for us. And that's when we started feeling that nothing was fair, starting from the fact that nothing would bring my son back. Well, soon my family realized that what was happening to us was also happening to many others that had lost a loved one, maybe in a violent way, like crime or girls that had been raped. They were also claiming for justice. We weren't informed about the case. We weren't treated well by prosecutors, by judges. They even spoke to us in a language, as I said at the very beginning, I'm not a lawyer, and they spoke to me in a language and with words that I didn't understand. And what was worse, a few days after Kevin was killed, I had to go back to work. I had to go back to the school where I was teaching and where Kevin had been a student. I had to see his friends, I had to see his empty seat. And I had to do this because nobody was paying for the bills at home. And because now my family also had other needs. We had to go to the psychologist. My other two children, they were only 5 and 16 at the moment that this happened. And a week before the oral hearing, my husband died of a heart attack. So we also had financial problems here at home. And this was something that nobody cared about. Everybody just talked about what happened to my son, but not what happens to everybody else afterwards. So that's when victims of different families, we decided to get together. We decided to go to Congress and to introduce a bill to make a victim's law. We knew that we hadn't chosen to live what we were living, so we deserved to be treated in a different way. We knew from the very beginning that all victims and their families needed help. It was even worse in the provinces where families have to travel long distances to reach a court of justice, and where some lawyers, many lawyers, fool victims for civil compensation because victims have no idea about what they should do or what they should sign. We chose a certain moment, a moment when the government needed to show that they were listening to society. And we went directly to Congress and to the media. The media, I think that this happens especially here in Latin America, it's our #1 tool for help. What appears on TV or what is shared many times on Twitter, that reaches politicians. So that's where we started working. We presented the bill in the year 2016 and it was voted for and it started being applied in the year 2017. It took us a year, but during that year we campaigned a lot. We got together with all of these victims. We went to Congress. We went with the media. We showed the faces. We tried to think of shocking things, striking things, so as to reach many people. According to this law, I'll tell you now what it is that we achieved. The victim is not only the one whose life is changed or whose life is destroyed, but also the lives of all of those that are influenced by this that happened, by all of those that are affected by this violent act. So friends and family members are also considered now in Argentina to be victims, and we're able to have the right to have this victims law. And what this law established is that we have the right to press charges, and that statement has to be received immediately, to be treated in a respectful way. And whenever I say this, I kind of feel ashamed that we needed a law to be treated in a respectful way. We have the right to be informed about our rights, to ask for protection if it is needed, to receive free psychological, physical, and legal assessment. Now there is a free contact number in Argentina, the number 149, and anybody can call 24/7 to receive all of this help. We can also receive financial help if we have to travel these long distances or if we need temporary lodgings. For example, a road crash can happen in a province far from one's home, and maybe one of the members of our families has to stay there in the local hospital, so we can ask for free lodgings. We have the right to be part of the civil and criminal case. We have the right to be constantly informed about the case, to be listened to, because sometimes we felt that we went to court or that we went to speak to the district attorney and we weren't listened to and we weren't informed about what was happening. We have the right to recover anything that remained in the car or on a motorcycle. Many times they would tell us, well, no, that personal belonging got lost. And we know that probably it was stolen. Well, now we have the right to get it back. This law was passed. I read there that somebody was asking, what is the name of my organization? I belong to Madres del Dolor in Argentina. But this law was passed because we got together with many other NGOs and with many other victims, and it was passed in all provinces. But now, one of the problems that we're facing is that there are many judges and many DAs that still don't apply it. So what we're doing is we're organizing workshops, we're going to courts, we're going to law schools and universities, so that the victims law is known by everyone, so that there are no excuses for not applying it. And I'm just finishing up by telling you the 2 challenges that we had to face. First of all, we had to organize ourselves, right? It all started with a phone call from another victim, a victim of crime, and we each started contacting the victims that we knew. I knew road crash victims, he knew other victims, and we all got together. Many NGOs have different aims, so we had to put aside higher expectations and understand clearly what we needed, what we wanted to achieve, where our limit was, right? And we had to understand that some voices were louder than others, that some had more access to the media or to Congress than others. So we had to put aside our personal ego so that our voices could be heard. And we had to go step by step to achieve this change. And the last thing, and that I'm adding it again and again, is we had to leave aside our personal egos, right? Road victims had to join other victims, and together we were able to make this change. And now victims in Argentina have this right, which is really very important. So I can share this law with anybody. If you need it, I can pass it on to Maria, and you can have this law. Thank you.
Vivian, thank you very, very much.
Patrick, if I may, I have one question for Vivian,
yes,
actually.
okay.
So you presented a law, so you drafted, like this conglomerate of NGOs drafted a law. So I don't want you to tell us all the process, but exact how you did that. Did you work with one person who was in charge of writing? Like, how did you do that?
No, first of all, what we said is, this is what happened to us, and this is what has to be changed. We didn't know how to write a bill. So there was a representative in Congress that said, okay, I can draft the law for you, and he did it.
Okay, perfect. So in this case, this is a legislative initiative. Even though it was pushed by the civil society, it was, okay, that was what I was after, just to connect with the session. Thank you, Vivian.
Yes,
absolutely. And that's, I think, I will not add or remove anything from those testimonies. And also, I think we can all reflect on them and see what things to take away, what things we are doing, and so on. So I don't want to belabor that, but I want to, first of all, to thank you, Bright and Vivian, for giving us that account. If you had time, we'd like to hear more from different NGOs, but for the sake of time, I think we can work with the case examples that we can emulate. And also we have this, the Alliance Network, that we can share this, as Vivian has said. If you want more, then you can get in contact. If you want Bright more, you can get in contact with Bright. So I want to say that so far we have covered sort of the basics and a bit of technical. I want to usher in EASST, and they will be able also to give us clear and more concise examples, especially in terms of looking for that information analysis and looking for where do you get all this information when you want to do that. And we are talking about, when you're saying, as an NGO, you need to know a lot of background, research on your own before even you can think of maybe approaching, like what Vivian said, they have to do a lot of work. So I want to welcome Emily from EASST, and to take us for the next about 45 minutes, and then we shall conclude the day. So Emily, this is the moment we've been waiting for. Welcome, and yeah, you'll be able to share your screen, I think. Martin, is that okay?
Thank you, Patrick.
Of course.
Yeah, okay.
I can share my screen. We're not going to do that just yet, but just to say hello to everyone. Lovely to be here, and thanks for all we've done so far. That was excellent, and that was really very moving. That hearing about your law, that was amazing. So very, very well done, reminding us why we're all here. I'm Deputy Director at the Eastern Alliance of Safe and Sustainable Transport. I think most of you know us, but we're an NGO who work across 15 countries with a network of road safety organisations. We have a long track record of working in policy change, and we're currently working on a project working across 9 countries, looking at safe speeds around school zones. So we'll reflect on that. And we're going to split this session into 2 halves. The second half of the session, I'm going to talk, as Patrick was saying, about some of the research and some of the building blocks you need to put in place to underpin your advocacy campaign. But the first half of the session, I'm going to hand over to David Ward. Many of you know David already, I'm sure. He was sort of one of the key figures behind the 50 by 30 campaign and getting the new UN target adopted. He is president of the Towards Zero Foundation, which is a UK NGO working towards creating a safe system and zero road deaths, and as well as being General Secretary of Global NCAP. So busy man. And I'm sure many of you are aware, Global NCAP's work on crash testing and pushing for better vehicle standards. However, prior to all that, David was working in UK politics. He was head of policy for a politician, a very popular politician called John Smith, who was the leader of the UK Labour Party and the leader of the opposition in the UK Parliament. Before he very sadly died in 1994, though it's sort of widely accepted that if it hadn't been for his untimely death, he would have become Prime Minister. And David was his head of policy. And we've asked David here today just to talk partly from that political perspective. Obviously, he's got a huge amount of road safety knowledge, but looking from that political perspective about how you approach an advocacy campaign, and give us a few tips about how to approach politicians, to think about the things NGOs should have in their mind when they do that, and to think about the things we get wrong, the common mistakes, and how we should try and engage with politicians and overcome some of those issues. So I will hand over to David, who will talk to us for a bit, and then we'll open up to some questions and discussions on those issues.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Emily, and great to see lots of friendly and familiar faces, and wonderful to follow Bright and Vivian. Actually, most of what I'm going to say, you're already doing it. So I'm going to come up with what I call the 5 key ingredients to successful advocacy. So these are quite general, but I think they're important. First one is always identify rigorously your target, who you're trying to influence. And that involves, which I think Progress will talk about a bit later, is what people call power mapping, is try and work out the decision-making hierarchies really well of who you're trying to influence. So if it's a government, you're obviously talking about the minister, but then try and find out who is their key advisor, because often they're the really vital individuals. Maybe MPs that are particularly related to that minister, other wider influences. You know, who are their main voters if they're in a democracy, or others? Who are the influential people behind them? You need to really do that research to build up a good profile of who it is you're trying to influence. And remember also, that shouldn't be just a vertical sort of process. It's kind of horizontal. There's got to be a number of those power maps in parallel, because what you actually have to do is also find out who are your likely supporters and who are your likely opponents. You sort of have to know your enemies. So for exactly the same process that you find out who are your allies and work out their hierarchies, do the same for the people who are likely to be opposing. And remember that within a government, whether it's local government or national government, there will be internal competition. There will be some departments that are opposing. And even though you might, for instance, have a very friendly meeting with a health minister or a transport minister, you may find that an industry ministry or the finance ministry will be bitterly opposed. So you've got to think in this wider sort of perspective when you're doing this kind of target setting and power mapping. The other thing which is tremendously important is define your core message and your core request as simply and as specifically as possible, and always try and keep it to a very small number. I mean, I would say a maximum of 3 points. I've been on the receiving end when I was policy advisor, as Emily was explaining, to senior politician, lobbying groups that would come with these huge long lists, and it was just overwhelming, the whole discussion, and we couldn't work out what were the real priorities within this great long shopping list. So it was really very unproductive. So that requires you to be very disciplined. You've got to identify exactly what your priorities are, and let's say maximum 3 in any given area, I would say. The other critical thing is make them achievable. It's no good setting objectives for politicians that they can't deliver on. So you've got to try and give them winnable things that they can gain some credit for. So that's a timescale thing. Very often for me, it's about the direction of travel that one's going in. Are they supporting the general direction in the correct way rather than accepting everything we want? So it's all about momentum and direction of travel. Another a little tip is that very often if you get to meet senior politicians, senior decision makers, one of the mistakes that many groups make is they talk too much in meetings. They come with a delegation and then they dominate the meeting and they get all their messages across. But I can tell you the politician loves that. They sit there silently nodding, saying as little as possible, because that's what they want the meeting to end with, them having said as little as possible, because they don't want to have to make commitments. And they may seem very sympathetic, but the critical thing is to stop them, your intervention as early as is practical, and then ask them what they're going to do. And another tip is always have something, even if it's quite minor, a follow-up request that you'd like to make, so you have another reason to come back to them. So that you create a chain of communication, not just well, it was nice to see you, goodbye, and thanks very much. Because I've sat in meetings where these issue groups come in, and then as they've left, the politician just sits there and says, there's nothing we can work with there, even though they will have given a very positive impression. So that's really important about defining the core message and making sure that they have something to do, the target, your politician has something to do before you go. The other third item is try as much as you can to put yourself in their shoes. Very often when we're very passionate about one big issue, it's easy to imagine that that's the way they look at things. They don't. Politicians and governments, they have very broad responsibilities, and they're trying to reconcile many competing issues. So their whole agenda is about how do you keep all these balls in the air. And you've got to kind of think through that and then try and make sure that the issue you're presenting to them, the way you're presenting it, is something that they really want to embrace. And here I've got a kind of an analogy. Imagine that you're a politician for a minute, and this is the game. You've got to go along a road, which is a very bumpy road, and the finishing line is the election or the end of this 5-year plan or whatever it is. And you've got this wheelbarrow with like a dozen apples in there. The apples are your policies. That's what you want to get across the finishing line. And so you're bouncing along this road. That's what the politician feels like, with these apples bouncing up and down. The question is your issue going to be likely to be one of the apples they will put in the cart? If they think it's going to fly out of the cart very quickly, they won't put it there. And so you've got to understand that that's the kind of dynamic they're thinking of. And by the way, they're in a wheelbarrow on one side of the road. There's another wheelbarrow beside them who's trying to beat them to the finishing line. And there's probably someone behind them trying to push them off the wheelbarrow, which is someone who would like to be the job that they're currently in. And that's the sort of pressures they're operating under. So try and make sure that you can be delivering the apple that is so attractive that they put it right down at the bottom of the wheelbarrow and they hang on to it for as long as they can. I think that analogy in a way captures a little bit what it's like juggling all these kind of crazy things. The other point, which actually has been said so well, and Bright expressed it really well, is build coalitions. A lot of this, it's like military strategy. Napoleon was famous for winning battles by making his armies look bigger than they actually were. And that's what we need to do. NGOs need to make it look like we've got all the troops all over the place. And the more diverse, the more broad-based our coalition can be, the more likely we are to succeed and to give a sense to politicians that it's in their interest to keep all our communities happy. And I think, particularly if you take the issue of speed, part of it is unlocking what sometimes people call the sort of the silent majority. We know that if you try and go for a 30 mph, 30 kph, 20 mph speed limit, you'll get some noisy resistance. They tend to be a minority, but they're very noisy. So we've got to counteract that by really reaching out to a wider coalition of people in the community who are ready to be vocal and ready to support. And that's the kind of thing that politicians will understand, but you have to demonstrate it. Coalitions really must be carefully constructed. They must all be given their voice and their profile. It's a little bit like what Vivian was talking about. There's no place for ego in all of this. Organizations need to share the space, not try and dominate campaigns. The more you can share your logos, be building a broad platform, the more likely to succeed you will be. And then the final point, which is very obvious, but use the media. You've got to be visual. And everything you do is visual. Every single meeting, a letter to a government minister, everything has a visual content. And they always say a picture is 1,000 words. And these days, it's never been easier to get all our images out there through social media. Politicians are enormously sensitive to that. All decision makers are. So we have to do that relentlessly. Even if you think, my God, this is so boring, everybody's seen this before. No, they haven't. You just have to keep doing it. So that's really my summary, is those 5 points: is identify the target with this sort of power mapping, define the core message, keep it really simple and short, make it winnable, put yourself in their shoes. I can't emphasize how important that is. I think it's probably the single most important one, because the politicians, despite impressions to the contrary, are human beings. They're operating under enormous pressure. And if you can sort of convey that you understand that, they'll really appreciate it. And I think they'll become much better allies. And then build coalitions and use the media. I mean, I feel, I must admit, listening to all of you and knowing what you all do, I don't feel much of what I've said is going to be news to any of you. But it's basically the experience I've built up over more than, actually now a horrific 40 years of different kinds of campaigning. So thanks very much for the opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there's time. Thanks.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. That was really, really great summary. And I think really sort of encapsulates it all very nicely and very colourfully, so we can visualise it. I don't know if there are any specific questions on that. I can't see anything in the chat, but has anyone got any reflections they would like to make? Oh, I can see one hand up. Someone from Nigeria has their hand up.
Yeah, Emily, I'll help you with the question. Let's see, so that we look at the time. Okay. So Nigeria, quick question. Try to be as brief as possible and to the point.
Hello?
Go ahead. Yeah, Prince.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I am actually excited. I'm excited about the progress so far in this meeting. And we're moving forward, but I want to make one point categorically. Every country in Africa or in the world is an advocate, and then similarly the solutions has to come from those in those countries. So the advantage of us participating in this meeting is to how we can put our heads together and come up with ideas that can help us resolve the challenges we are facing. Basically, moving from campaign to advocacy is a great one. Actually, I've been on the radio station from 2 o'clock this afternoon, Liberty FM in Nigeria.
Sorry, Prince. I need you to ask a question. It is direct, so because we have limited time. If you are going to share, we can share that tomorrow. But do you have a question for that session presented by Mr. David Ward?
Okay, it's very simple. The question is this. What is the step required? What is the step required for NGOs to connect to advocacy?
Okay, maybe you can
required? What do we need to do as NGOs?
Okay, Prince, because of you don't have a good connection, can you type the question on chat and then we are going to answer that, because we didn't catch the question as we come to next question. Please type your question. Ali, let's see whether your connection is okay.
Yeah, I want just to ask David about the enemies, as he talked about the enemies. What's the best approach to deal with the enemies, I don't know, the people that are against our goals and objectives? But what's the best approach to deal with them?
That's a very good, great to see you, Ali, and very good question. And I think, I mean, for example, in the areas that I've worked a lot, which is around vehicle standards, you invariably get very strong resistance from some of the car manufacturers, not all of them. And then sometimes they have sort of clients in government. So the industry ministry kind of does what the car manufacturers say. So you have to tailor yourself to those arguments. I mean, very often, funny enough, I'm just working on this right now with John Chatterton-Ross and various other people, producing a document that we're calling a myth-busting document about anti-lock brakes in motorcycles. At the moment, the motorcycle industry is saying it's too expensive and not worth doing. In fact, it's an extremely simple and low-cost lifesaver. So one of the things we're doing is we're putting together a document that takes all of the negative arguments and one by one destroys them systematically. And so I think sometimes you just have to take the enemy audience on head on. And very often, my experience has been that they don't come up with very good answers if you can do this. And it's all about empowering. There'll be, in a government, classically, there will be a dispute between ministries. over a measure like that. And what you've got to do is empower the allies on your side, typically the transport ministry or health ministry, and give them all the evidence they can get to counteract those sort of internal lobbying pressures. That's a classic example from where you're arguing about standards. I mean, as I discussed, where it's a more general policy like over speed limits, it's exactly as I think others have shown, and I mentioned before. You take on the enemies by showing that they're a minority, and showing that actually different community groups who have not been so vocal have a legitimate voice. So for example, on speed, make sure you get in touch with very often women's groups that are connected to schools and safe routes to schools, vulnerable groups, disabled and so on. Get all of their voices heard. And that, it doesn't eliminate the opposition, but it kind of rebalances the whole discussion. And a very important part of all of this is to try and use the media as as a platform for you. And you will find also this opposition and enemy problem can exist in the media. You will get some news outlets that are more favorable, for example, to industry or whatever, and others not. And so obviously you try and make sure that the news outlets that are, or platforms that are going to be sympathetic, have all the information that you can give them. In the end, it's a battle of ideas and information. And I'm pretty confident that we can win them nearly all, because we have such good arguments and such passion. We just have to be completely committed and dedicated to getting the message across.
Thank you very much. Ali, I hope you are satisfied. Is there another question? I think, David, I just want to say thank you. The question that was coming from Nigeria was about what the NGOs should do to move from campaigning to advocacy. And I thought you gave 5-point checklist of 5 points that are very key. So again, for the sake of reference, we have this in the recording, and anyone has, you can always go back what David has outlined as the key points to move from that to advocacy, and also others. So thank you. Emily, I don't see another question on the chat, neither on...
David Frost has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Thank you for noticing that. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Patrick. Hello, David. Yeah, we did meet in Cape Town some years back when you were out here with the NCAP for the cars that were done here. But anyway, nice to see you.
Sure.
And be that as it may, again, this is just, this is just reinforcement of what you're saying. Politicians are people, and they want to look good. And what you present to them must be short, sweet, to the point, and winnable for them. That's going to make them look good as well. And I think that is key. And my experience too, when NGOs do come to you, and I worked for politicians as well in my life, they come with a long arm length of stuff. We want all of this to be done. And it's just so overwhelming. So yes, if they can take that small point and keep it short, the one particular point you want, choose the most winnable and the most ideal argument that you want to have them address, and then do that. So yeah, and it comes back to what I said earlier. You as the NGO must do your homework thoroughly. Your research must be complete, so that when you do go to the person, it's almost it's non-winnable for them to refuse you. So yes, I think that is key. And yeah, thanks for highlighting those points. It's very, very valid. So thanks for the opportunity, Patrick, as well, and Emily. But David, well, keep up the good work you're doing.
Thanks. So just to reinforce exactly what you said, I think another way to look at this is to try and get the decisions you want to be irreversible, so that again, it's about this direction of travel. I think one of the struggles that the NGO community has, any advocacy group has, is very often they want the best. They want 100% kind of now, and there's all the reasons emotionally why we want that. But realistically, that's very rarely going to happen. So the really important thing is to make sure that the changes we get are very good building blocks to further progress. And one of the things, a big mistake I've seen is when governments have done something that's been pretty good, not necessarily the best, we then criticize them for failing to have done everything. And I think that often really disappoints internally the people we've been asking to do this. And so I'm not suggesting we bust out the champagne and celebrate enormously for everything, but we need to calibrate our messaging and give reward where it's justified and support it, confident that we're going to have to come back and ask for more. But don't fall into the trap of condemning them for not doing everything immediately, because otherwise you basically divorce yourself from further discussion.
Okay, thank you, David, and thank you, David Frost from South Africa. So, all
good.
Yeah.
Can you see any more questions, Patrick?
I think one more question, if there's any. Yeah. I don't see any hand up. I don't see anything on. Yeah, I don't see anything on. Yeah.
There's one.
This is Patrick from Cape Town. I have my hand up, I hope.
Okay, go ahead anyway. Anyhow, yeah, for the last question.
Yeah, just a quick one to David. Thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, in terms of the coalitions that you mentioned, building coalitions, how broad should these coalitions be? I'm thinking, do you include anyone who is interested, or because at times you get competing interests, competing motives, how broad should the coalition be in terms of these coalitions that we build?
Yeah, again, that's a very good question. I mean, the problem with coalitions is they're quite hard. It's like herding cats. And you can put a lot of time and effort into building the coalition, which detracts from other things you've got to do. I mean, that's a very tricky judgment. Ideally, you get a core group of 4 or 5 organizations that all share the same agenda, and then build from there. But it is, you're right, there are practical issues about if it becomes too diverse, it becomes too diffused, and the message gets lost. So these are all the challenges of NGO life. And but I think the really important point, which I think Vivian really said it extremely well, is there's no place for ego. You have to, organizations have to be able to share space with one another, share credit where credit's due, and shoulder these efforts together, because you'll be much more influential with the target you're trying to. In the end, politicians want to be liked, and they want to get re-elected, or anyway continue in office. And so the more support we can bring them, the better it will be.
Thank you, and Patrick from Cape Town, I hope you've been answered adequately. And Emily, I want, on my behalf, thank you, David, and Emily, proceed with your session. Thank you.
There was one question in the chat earlier, which is slightly left field, so I don't know whether this is something David wants to comment on or not, but someone was asking about working with royalty and getting them engaged in those states.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've done that. I mean, we're guilty of that. We've had, our patron is His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent. I mean, he's done a fantastic job. He has his awards and so on. I mean, I think actually it's more, there's a broader issue with celebrities, working with celebrities or VIPs. And I'm all in favor of that. But you will always, you have the problem that anyone who is famous VIP, you can have problems if something untoward happens. So there is a risk. You have to do very good, you build up a sense of trust and confidence with whom you're working, so it doesn't backfire. But generally, the right VIPs are well worth working with, and they can help a lot, as Prince Michael certainly has with us.
That's really helpful, David. Thank you.
Yeah, there is the last question, I think, is coming from Daniela. I think that would be the last, David, I promise. So Daniela, go ahead.
Oh, thank you so much. I was asking in the chat, what do you think, or how do you think the pandemic changed the advocacy dynamics, and what things should remain after the pandemic, or these times that we are like in a hybrid reality? Thank you.
Wow, that is an extremely difficult question. I mean, at one level, it's been obviously a disaster, because the kind of ability for us to sustain the momentum after the fantastic Swedish ministerial and the rest of it has been quite diminished. The lack of face-to-face meetings has been a big challenge. I'm looking forward to being able to get back to those kind of real world interactions. But what has been positive is what we're doing. Zoom has transformed levels of participation and access. And even though we get frustrated with how many times we're speaking like this, I've noticed different organizations that I've been involved with, where we used to have only physical meetings with maybe 70, 80 participants. Some of these Zoom meetings, you suddenly find it's 150 and so on. So at one level, we've been given a much wider platform. So I think the future is we've got to come back with the best of both, not lose the intimacy of real meetings where you can kind of eyeball one another and really convey properly one's passion and interest in an issue, but keep the engagement potential that new media have allowed us in these very difficult times. So I think that's, for me, that's the opportunity we have. It's a sort of hybrid future in terms of advocacy.
Absolutely. Okay. Emily, in terms of your planning, do you need any more question or do we move on?
I think I'm happy to take more questions if they're there, but otherwise, I think that was a really, really excellent summary.
Yes.
Really,
okay, great.
Really
so
thank you.
Okay, great. So so David, don't get tired. I think it's a good moment for us. Dilip from India, again, try to be point to the question as much as possible so that we try to save on time. So Dilip has a question from India.
Yes, hi to all of you. Being a committee member in this Road Safety Council, still I find some challenges. I don't know, today you have given me a clear description about advocacy, campaigning and lobbying. So what is the appropriate way to handle this situation? Because I can directly contact with the minister, but still I have a lot of challenges.
Sorry, I'm not, I mean, it's good if you have contacts. Is that Minister Gadkari you're talking about?
Yeah, Transport Minister, directly I can speak to them, but still I'm unable to manage to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I must say India is a fascinating country because in some areas it's made enormous progress. And we've seen that in vehicles. I mean, there's been a big step forward in vehicle standards, which has been led by Minister Gadkari. But I had the opportunity and privilege of being in India many times, many years. I appreciate very much how challenging, you have by far the most challenging road environment in the world. And I think the other complexity in all of this is the role of the federal government, state governments, and so on. So, I well appreciate how difficult it is to make, I've always made anything gets done in India.
Which one you feel appropriate? It's advocacy or campaigning or lobbying to get job done?
I think they're all aspects of the same thing. And in the work we've done on vehicles, which has really succeeded, what has been absolutely critical is the amount of media attention we got. And we were in the news, and there's no doubt that politicians, the government reacted to pressure from outside. They reacted positively, and we've been very supportive of them for doing that.
You mean that media plays a vital role?
Yeah, 100%. And also you have some very good champions. For instance, Deepak Dash is a journalist on the Times of India. He's a wonderful guy. He writes brilliantly. Getting that sort of support behind your causes are enormously important. And we had a whole TV show on NDTV, the Car and Bike Show, supporting and broadcasting our crash test results. That was hugely influential. So it is an enormous challenge. I think for me, advocacy, campaigning, and lobbying is all one thing. It's not separate. And the skill that is so challenging for all of us is you have to kind of do everything at once. You have to. It's like conducting an orchestra. You've got to get all the different elements all coming in at the right moment. So it's a great organizational challenge. But I think NGOs also have a great ability to be light on their feet. They can move fast. and also they have the authenticity that is critical, because we speak from the heart as well. We mobilize the best evidence we can, but we speak passionately from the heart, and I think those are the things that we need. But I'm always in awe of campaigners in India, because I know how tough it is. But I feel personally that Minister Gadkari is the best transport minister I've seen in India in a long, long time.
Thank you. I think I have some more questions, but still there's no time. Thank you very much. Let's see later.
Okay, thank
you, Patrick.
Dilip. Yeah, thank you, Dilip. Okay, yes.
I think Pogos, who from Armenia, is on the call. He was just going to add a comment to that answer. That's okay?
Absolutely.
Hello to everyone. Once again, I think David did a brilliant presentation, and actually he's been able to summarize the whole life of an advocate into a couple sentences. Thanks, David. From one side, it might seem so easy, but that's really a whole life to do. I wanted to comment about the last question regarding the campaigning, advocacy, and lobbying. And I think this is where the whole confusion is taking some time. Actually, the advocacy is a description of an activity which actually includes everything into it. The campaigning and the lobbying. So you may do campaign, but it does not mean that you do advocacy work. But if you do advocacy, you have to do campaigning. And you have to go through lobbying as well, through the positive lobbying, in its positive understanding, of course. So I think there was before also a question about what should NGOs do to pass from campaign to advocacy. I think David was very clearly saying that you need step by step, you need a strategy well before. You need a list of activities to go through. And I think other presenters as well did this. I think you have to plan. If you start change of a policy, then you have the strategy to go through, and the campaign, it's a must. And through the campaign, you build the coalition, you get the public, you get the constituency. So the whole work comprises into that campaigning and the exact messages that you need to go through depending on the target audience, of course. So that's basically what I wanted to say.
Wow, Pogos, thank you very much. I think that gives us a sneak preview of tomorrow's what you are going to give us some more on the step-by-step course of action. So I think, Emily, that's a good interjection. And thank you, Pogos. Hope to have more of that tomorrow. Emily, still any direction from here?
I mean, I think if that's the end of the questions, and I thank David very, very much for joining us, and say it was a really excellent session. And you can see from the chat, it's been very, very well received, and there's lots of appreciation in there. So thank you so much, David, for coming on and joining us. And we'll move on to the next session, if that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know whether there was any final comments from either Lotte, if you are there, any comments before we move to the next final session, second last session. If not,
I just want to say thank you, David. Thank you. Always nice to hear your advice. You're a strong advocate, and you've been around for such a long time. So it's really, really good to hear from you. I was just quoting you. The squeaky wheel gets the grease earlier. So that's something that sits with me. I think that's a good advice as well, that maybe should be added to this.
Yeah.
But thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Lotte.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, David.
Yes.
Okay, Patrick. So for the sort of second half of this session, I put together a presentation which I will share with you. In fact, we've done so well on knitting together our research and our activities this afternoon. A lot of what I was going to say has been covered, particularly reinforces some of what David's been saying, but I will go through it quickly and try not to be too repetitive. Just trying to sort my screen out, sorry. No. Thank you. So try not to be too repetitive and just take you through my PowerPoint. And as I say, a lot of it has been covered, but I think it's a useful recap of where we are and what we've done so far today. And hopefully we'll bring things together in a sort of coherent way for the end of the day. So this is looking at, so the idea of this session is just look at what the research and preparation you need to do to underpin your advocacy campaign is. And a lot, as I say, a lot of it has been covered already, but I'll go through it quickly. Firstly, as we've already said, if you're going to do an advocacy campaign, you need to have a really clear aim. You need to know what you're asking. You need to know who you're targeting. You need good research underpinning it. And you need a support by coalition partners. And you need to accept that it's going to be a long-term activity. It's not going to be done quickly. I mean, we put this session together to build on the UN Global Road Safety Week. There's no question of advocacy being done in a week. It's about that very long-term relationship building. So what we're going to look at during this session is how you set your goal, how you identify your targets, how to define your case, and how to build a coalition of support. And so the initial thing, which I think David covered very well, was how you define your goal. What are you trying to change? If you take the UN Global Road Safety Week as an example, they were talking about lower speeds where people, and 30 km/h speeds where people walk, live and play. And we know that lower speeds benefit communities, and that 30 km/h speeds would be great everywhere if we could achieve them, on all residential streets where there's a sort of mix of vulnerable road users. But you need to be realistic about what you're trying to achieve, and we've covered, people have talked about this already today, but you need to think about what is realistic. And as David was saying, you want to make it easy for politicians to have an easy win, for them to feel good about what they're doing, for them to be able to deliver. So you need to target where you're going to pitch yourself. I mean, if I was doing this in the UK, there are a lot of local authorities going for blanket 30 km/h speed limits, and that would be great, and that would be a really good target. But working with our partners in East countries, we've had to think realistically about what people can make as their target. What is the political situation? What is the public level of support? What is the history of road safety campaigning? What is the strengths and support from decision makers? So you need to be really careful about thinking what you're going to aim for. And in our East countries, we've gone for a range of targets. So some are looking at 30 km/h around school zones. Others have decided to start on sort of much smaller pilot projects, looking at focusing on one particular school or one particular street. And you need to just be really, really aware of what you're going to choose, and you need to be really clear on what that is. So what is your target going to be? Is it going to be the 30 km/h on all streets where people and traffic mix? Is it going to be 30 km/h in school zones? Is it going to be, we want this particular street outside this school with a 30 km/h speed limit? What is it? And you need to be really clear on what that is, because if you're not clear, nobody else will be clear, and you won't be able to communicate it, and you won't be successful. So just that really clear thinking about where you're going to start and what you're going to try and achieve. And once you've done that, there's some key questions you have to ask yourself, and this goes back to David Frost's comment about doing your homework. You need to know, and it goes back to what Valeria was saying about knowing where the power is, knowing what level of decision making you're targeting. How are the speed limits set? Are they set locally? Are they set nationally? Who has the power to change those speed limits? Which organisation and which government department is responsible for these streets, and who can make that change? So you need to do your research on that, and that's going to be, it's going to be digging around. It's going to be talking to friendly representatives, talking to the road police, doing online research. I mean, some of you will know this off the top of your head, and it will be obvious, but you need to dig around and make sure you've got that, and make sure you're really clear about where that power lies, because only then can you identify your target. So who are you trying to influence? And you're trying to influence the authority which has to make the change, the power to make the change you want to make. So whether that be the Ministry of Transport or the city mayor, you need to know who they are and be very clear that they have the power to make that decision. And as I say, with our East partners, we've got 3 countries working on looking at policy change on this, and each one of them has got a different answer to that question. So it's different in every situation. I'm sure Pogos will talk to us tomorrow about this, or later on today. But in Armenia, the power rests with the national parliament. and they need to find a legislator who will put forward the relevant legislation. For our partners in Georgia, the speed limits are set at local authority level, and it's the local mayor who can make that change. In Moldova, there's a National Road Safety Council, and they have the power. So you need to be really clear exactly where the power is and who you are targeting. Once you know, again, this leads back to what David was saying, once you know, you need to know about them. You need to know who are their key influencers, who are their key contacts and advisors, what policies have they supported in the past, what have they not supported in the past, are they known to have an interest in road safety issues, have they engaged in other issues which might be useful, do they have an interest in education or in health or other things you can tag onto. And you should be building up a picture so you can think about routes in and hooks to get their attention. And as David was saying, you can do this via power mapping. And there's several sort of, I've got another power map later on where you're looking at all the stakeholders, but just looking at power mapping around your key decision maker. You might want to take this form and just have a think about what the influences on your decision makers are. And as David was saying, if you can get to the advisors, that's really, really helpful. If you could have got to David when he was working for John Smith, that would have been an excellent route in. They're thinking about who their key advisors are and who's got their ear. Think about political allies. So, for example, our partners in Moldova made tremendous headway because the Speaker of the Moldovan Parliament had lost his mother in a road crash, and he was incredibly passionate about supporting their work and help them get road safety education into the curriculum. He wasn't the decision maker, he couldn't make that happen, but he opened all the doors for them. So who is there who can help you reach the decision maker? And the other thing to think about, as David was saying, is not all these influencers around your decision maker will necessarily be helpful voices. There will be budget holders who will be pushing back against anything which they think may cost money. So you need to be aware of the negative forces as well. Just one more thing to say about officials can also be very helpful. Our partners in Georgia, although they're targeting the elected local authority representatives, they're working very closely with the officials who have to implement the legislation because they believe that's a key route and could be one of the key barriers. So they're educating the officials about the value of low speed limits, so that gives them an easier passage for their message. So just thinking about what all those influences are and how you can tap into those. And then once you know what you want to change and who you want to target, you want to research your case. Now, there are loads of international resources, I'm sure you're all familiar with these, which you can use. There's the Global Road Safety Report, there's the Road Safety Week Toolkit. I mean, although the Road Safety Week has happened, there's still got lots of valuable information in there. There's the Child Health Initiative Toolkit, which has got great resources and all geared up for you to be able to borrow and use their ideas. And obviously there's a Stockholm Declaration in terms of a sort of really strong international underpinning of your message. But any good case will have to be taken locally. Local governments don't want, or national governments don't want to hear the international message. They certainly don't want to hear it alone. It will reinforce, but you need to know what your message is locally. So you need to do your local research as well. You need to know what are the current speed limits and how they fit with international recommendations. And that question can be much more complex than you think, because we've discovered in the East region there can be all sorts of peculiar local quirks and blips you weren't expecting in the regulation. So you need to do that really thoroughly and make sure you're clear on what you're asking. If you want to access crash data, that's absolutely crucial if you can get it. It's not always easy to get, but if you can get it, it's hugely valuable. And also whether you have any information about speed enforcement, are the current speed limits respected? And getting this information can require being relatively creative. So for example, especially with crash data, our partners in Georgia couldn't get any direct data, but they did manage to speak to the Ministry of Education, who had seen data and had worked out already which were the most at-risk schools. And so our partners could use that information, although they couldn't get the raw data, they were very clear on which schools had had the most fatalities around them, and they could use that to build their case. In Tajikistan, again, our partners couldn't get direct data, but they went out with the road police and helped them with their speed enforcement and saw the violations going on around speed, so they could then go to their decision makers and say, actually, we can see that although the speed limit is 30 kilometers an hour or 40 kilometers an hour, drivers are traveling at 60, 70, 80 kilometers an hour, and they had that data to prove their case. So it's about being really creative. If you can't get immediately the data you need, it's about looking at how you can develop that. The other option is whether there's things you can do with things like star ratings for schools. So if you don't have crash data, can you go and star rate the schools and use that resource to create data on which to base your campaign? So once you've done your homework, you can define your problem. So this is just a sort of sample example of what you could come to at the end of your research. And this says speed limits around most of our schools in our city are 40 kilometers an hour. In some schools they're 60 kilometers an hour. There's little enforcement and they're often exceeded. And then the actual crash data, so this is, there were 120 pedestrian fatalities and 11 of those were children. So that's really hard hitting. It's succinct, it's clear, it helps you make your case. And if you're not clear and succinct in what your case is, again, it will be really hard to communicate. So you really want to think clearly. You want to know what the issue is and what the problem is you're trying to solve. And then you want to think about your solution, because going to politicians with just a problem isn't going to help you. You need to know what you're going to propose as a solution. So we know lower speeds save lives. So you can say, we believe, this is a sample, but we believe that children have a right to a safe journey to school, and speed limits should be reduced to 30 kilometers an hour in school zones. And that's a really simple, clear, concise ask. As David was saying, never more than 3 messages. But if you can have one really clear ask, it really helps your case. And then once you've done that, you know who you're targeting, you know what your case is, you know what your solution is. You want to think about how to build your coalition. And as David said, coalitions can be a mixed blessing, but it's really good to amplify your voice, to make it sound like that you've got momentum behind your campaign, to make it sound like you're bigger than you are. So think about how you can harness other groups to join you. Can you join with environmental groups? Can you join with climate campaigners? Can you join with active travel groups? Can you join with walking or cycling groups? And if you're working on speeds around schools, other schools or parent groups, or as David was saying, women's groups who might want to join your coalition. You also want to think about wider stakeholders you can bring in. So obviously the media, again, as David was saying, really, really useful to amplify your message. And can you find friendly journalists? Can you find people who either personally have been affected or have a history of reporting on these issues or an interest in it? Can you use your personal contacts to reach good journalists? Can you harness public support? And our EASST partners actually used UN Global Road Safety Week to think about how to do this, and they have conducted an online survey of publics about speed limits, so that they can now say very clearly, 70% of people support 30 kilometers an hour zones around schools. Now, it's quite a big piece of work, and we can give more details of that another time, and we're very happy to share that with people. But it's really, really useful, and each partner has a figure for their country. It fluctuates slightly, but it shows a level of public support they can take to their politicians to lobby for their change or to advocate for their change. Again, as David was saying, talking about road safety ambassadors, other celebrities you can bring on board, other people can help your case. So think about that, where they might be, who they might be. Think about other public authorities, and it's really important to stay focused on who has the power to make your change. You want to target them. You don't want to spend time working too much with other authorities, but they can give kudos and they can give strength to your argument. So if the road police are backing you, even if the road police aren't the people who can make the decision, it's really, really helpful to have their support. And again, just things about international organizations, if you have WHO offices or development banks or anyone locally who might be able to add support or weight to your message, as well as plugging into all those international, things like UN Global Road Safety Week, the international campaigns which give you additional support to your message. And then this is just one more sort of way of mapping out where you are before you kick off your campaign. So you want to know who is the most influential person. That is your key target. It's them. It's there, and you want to know where they are. You've got this line going across the middle of strongly oppose or strongly support, and you want to know where they are on this line. Obviously, your aspiration is to move them over into this top right-hand quadrant. And you also want to know who else is in this quadrant, who else who supports you and will have influence on them. So that goes back to your earlier power mapping of what are the influences on your minister or on your department, which you're trying to get, and which of those are in this corner where they strongly support you. You also want to be thinking about those wider coalitions where they may not have huge amounts of influence, but they can amplify your voice. They can help build your case. It's also useful for you to know who's down here, who isn't that interested in what you're doing, and who doesn't have much influence, because then you can just know you don't need to spend time on them. You can move on and do something else and really target your efforts where they'll have value. And then there's the people here. So the people who are influential but aren't support you, and they're the ones you really need to move across to this right-hand corner where they're supporting you and have influence. So just to summarize, in terms of before you kick off with your campaign, before you kick off with your lobbying, you want to have this underlying arc underneath everything you're doing, which sets out your advocacy campaign. It will set your goal. It will say really clearly what you want to achieve. It will have worked out really clearly who you want to target, who has the power to make this change. You will have thought about what your case is, what is the data behind it, how you make it, and what your really clear, straightforward ask is. And then finally, you'll have thought about building a coalition of support to amplify your message. It will be really hard to on your own, so you want to bring others in to support you doing that. And that's just a quick overview of, and I think that pretty much reinforces a lot of the messages you already had this afternoon. I don't think there was a huge amount there, but I hope it was a useful overview, and I hope it brought things together at the end of the afternoon.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Emily, thank you so much. I think, first of all, on behalf of myself, because this is what we were looking for, the detailed aspect of each of these planning and implementation and the monitoring, and also relooking and the reflections that go around when you are doing all this work. And I can see, like what Mr. David Ward said about, the lobbying, the advocacy, the campaigning, they are all wrapped into one. But the key thing is, if you don't define what you're doing at that moment, or understanding what is it that I'm aiming at this particular level, then you find you are all wrapped up in things that you don't know what's happening. So based on the insight given for that, I think tomorrow we'll be able to chart the way forward in terms of our individual level in our countries, as well as a global movement. How do we plan for action that are linked together to strengthen the global framework as well as change within our countries? So I think I want to give a chance for a question or two, or maybe one question. If there's a burning question, we can ask. Other than that, I know tomorrow we have more time with you and Claire, as well as the other team from EASST, to really put things on paper and make sure that we implement what we say tomorrow. So for the sake of time, I want just to do one thing, if you allow me, Emily. First of all, I think there'll be maybe more questions tomorrow. For now, thank you very much, Emily, for that presentation. And I want to do this, to ask Martin to bring out, if you reflect on what you have done today, Martin, can you bring out the poll again? We want to see, based on the insights you have gained today and the discussions you have had, how would you rate yourself in aspect of advocacy, where we are talking about policy change? So Martin, if you can bring up the poll.
So medium, we have 56%.
Okay.
On high, we have 33%.
Okay.
Good for you guys. And then on low, we have 11%.
Okay, so yeah, I think we are on the right track. I was just trying to see there are some doubts that you may have that, now you can see maybe I've not achieved as much. So at least that's quite good. That's good also for our own continued improvement on maybe sort of giving us better leverage next time as we look at this kind of discussion moving forward. So thank you very much. Let's hear quick takeaways from 3 people. Daniela, what struck you today as one of the key takeaways based on your perception and what you have received today? And then Daniela, 30 seconds.
Well, thank you so much for the session. I think one of the most important takeaways is that advocacy is the most compelling concept because it involves both campaign and lobbying. It also involves changing behaviors, changing politics, and having a broad impact in society. So that's like my takeaway.
Okay, thank you, Daniela, for sharing that. And Joseph, what was your one takeaway from today's discussions? Joseph, unmute yourself. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. 30 seconds.
Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you all the presenters. It has been very nice to attend this training. What I've taken away from here, what we see like we are not doing it well was we were not separating the campaign, lobbying, advocacy. We were doing all of them together. So we thank you very much for this training. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. And finally, Debu.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for inviting me here. It's a great opportunity for me to learn many things which I didn't know. Very seriously speaking, it's a great opportunity. I came to know about so many people's thought, experience, and knowledge, which will be helping me for my activity in future. Most importantly, we were more into awareness and defensive driving training, and lobbying and advocacy was not in my agenda. But I didn't know that 3 things are together. But we will keep 2 things separate from the thing now. Lobbying and advocacy will be our top of the agenda because that will be also helping. If at all we can make our lobby for making a lawmaker to make something changes for helping side. So more to see, we will after policy on the highway. That is there in my mind now. Yeah. And street cattle's menace is also our terrible point of issue in a country. As you know that we cannot do any injustice to the animal as well, because that will affect create a issue with the animal lobbyist, which they say that it is a crime against, which is a injustice for animals.
Yeah. Sorry, Debu, I have to stop you there because I know we have more discussions tomorrow. But I think you have got lobbying.
So before I end, I'll just take one more second. I think this meeting is becoming very exhaustive because sitting 3 hours is becoming too much.
Tomorrow, for us. Debu, tomorrow, let's not spoil the soup. Tomorrow we'll have the time to comment on all those once we finish. But I will have a chance to give feedback to all this. So thank you very much for that. And so on behalf of myself and the Alliance and all those presenters and the speakers, Emily, David, Claire, I know tomorrow we have you. And I want to thank everyone. And I urge you, let's do this tomorrow again and finally see where we are moving. Remember, always about direction and without losing our direction. I think that's the most important thing. But again, for the participants who have had a chance to participate, there'll be more tomorrow in our breakout sessions. And I wish you a very, very good evening and good morning, those who are in the morning, and a good afternoon for those who are in the afternoon. So hope to see you tomorrow. Connecting details are as you have been given. We have day 2 for the connecting. Use the same link. Again, you can join 15 minutes earlier, but we'll be opening at about quarter to the time. So if there's any final issue, Valeria, I've forgotten, please help me. If there's any issue I'm forgetting about tomorrow.
No, I think we're fine. We're good to go,
Good.
Patrick.
All right, thank you very much. And adios.